Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Time Traveled to Rewrite the Story? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Chapter 1: The Point of Return. The city no longer had the shape of a city. Everything was covered in a single color, the gray of ash. Izuku's feet walked over streets that had once been filled with laughter and noise. Now, all that remained was a heavy silence, as if it were the last breath leaving the chest of a dying world. The wind, which had once been a comforting presence, now carried the scent of burnt iron, caressing his face as if reading the last remnants of innocence left in him. He looked up to see the ruins of his old home. The broken structure he used to call safety had become nothing more than black bones, weeping a faint smoke. There was no one left to open the door and say, "Oh, Izuku, you're back." No one to run toward him and hug him. No mother. No warmth. No life. He gasped, struggling for air. A cough tore through his chest. He no longer knew if it was the tears blinding him or the dust. He kept walking. He passed the school, the UA Academy. The walls upon which his dreams were etched were demolished. The classrooms where he had laughed, cried, and dreamt were now a deep crater. And the courtyard that witnessed his first steps toward heroism was now just a fissure in the earth, as if someone had split his heart along with it. What remained of the heroes and survivors were milling about nearby, lifting rubble, shouting names. But the voices were distant, faint, as if his head were submerged underwater. He could only hear one voice in his head: "You're late again." He crossed the street whose every corner he knew. He saw the old man who owned the candy shop, the one who sometimes gave him sweets for free. His body was half buried under a collapsed metal staircase. The smile that had always welcomed him was gone. He saw the neighbor who used to wave to him from her window every morning. Her hand was still extended, but toward emptiness this time. He froze. He felt the world's weight thrown onto his shoulders all at once. This is the price of your loss, the cost of your defeat. You shouldn't have fallen, you were all the hope they had left. Yet, despite the pain that dug its claws into his heart, he sped up. There was one place, just one, that might hold a tiny hope for him. The last shelter. The place that was supposed to house the civilians, the neighborhood children, the wounded, his friends' families, and Eri. Izuku ran, despite the bleeding on his arm and the scratches, as if his very soul was running ahead of him. And when he arrived, his voice died in his throat. The shelter was destroyed. The ground had torn itself open. The walls were rubble. No sound, no hope at all. He collapsed onto his knees, curled up, denial owning him. He wanted to scream, he wanted all this pain to end, but a faint distant, but present. A small hope. He threw himself onto the debris, pushing stones away with trembling hands. His hands cracked and bled, but he did not stop. He searched with a desperate ferocity, as if he were digging into his own chest, not under the wreckage. And suddenly, he touched something warm. His heart stopped. He quickly pulled the rubble away to reveal a small face. A face he knew better than his own. Her eyes were half open, barely clinging to life. Her body, covered in wounds and bandages, trembled. When she saw his image above her, she smiled. A tiny smile. Ethereal. Broken. But a smile. She whispered with lips that barely moved, "Dita, to my hero." The words fell on his heart like a stab. And for a moment, he reverted to a child. Unable to save anyone. He reached his hands toward her, his voice shattered. "Stay with me. I'm here. But she wasn't listening. Or perhaps she had heard enough. Her final smile faded. Her body became light as winter ash. And her hands slipped from his fingers. No. Please, Eri, don't do this to me." No response, silence fell. The whole world stopped. Even the pain stopped. A scream. A scream not of sound, but a scream within his heart, shaking everything inside him. He fell to his knees, clutching her small body, his forehead trembling against her white hair. He didn't know how many minutes passed. A minute? An hour? A day? It didn't matter. All he knew was that he had lost everything he tried to save. Mistake after mistake. Decision after decision. Loss after loss. In the end, he saved no one. And he had no one left to save him. He whispered, his voice broken as if signing the end of his dream. If only I could go back. And the moment a tear fell onto Aries' cold cheek, the world around him exploded in white light. He woke up gasping. A dream? A hallucination? A nightmare? He didn't know. His widened pupils, his continuous tears, and his ragged breathing all persisted, but they didn't stop him from realizing the impossible reality of where he was. He was lying on a warm, blanket-covered bed. There were no stones beneath him scraping his skin, and the air was clean, not poisoning his lungs. There was no ash, no screaming, no death, no Aries, just the sound of the clock on the wall, and the quiet rays of morning's sun peeking through the window. He got up, checking his hands, his face, his wounds. Nothing. Everything felt like a dream. A warm scent drifted through the room, a smell he knew well, followed by not-so-distant humming. It seemed his mother was cooking in the kitchen. His mother? He whispered, "What? Where am I?" He stood before the mirror. The same face. The same weak body. His tears had stopped, but they left their paths etched on his cheeks. But his eyes did not belong to a child. Inside him, the entire war was still raging. Blood, death, screams. He took a breath, resisting the incoming panic attack as best he could. He touched his face, then saw his phone on his desk. He walked toward it, and the bright All Might wallpaper greeted him when he turned it on. He didn't notice that the wallpaper was one he'd set years ago, nor did he notice that the phone wasn't the one he currently owned, but a middle school model, but the date did not escape his notice. The day and month indicated that his birthday had passed a few days ago, but the year. He put the phone back and looked at his reflection again. Free of scars, he looked very young. The year indicated that he was 13 years old. He opened his window. The air, unexpectedly, was normal. The street alive. A moment of calm seeped into his mind, then collapsed all at once like a slap. He was back? He had returned in time? He was back to the age of 13? He possessed a complete memory of the war. The details of the dead. All Might's breakdown. The fall of the heroes. His own fall. Losing his mother. Losing everyone he loved. And Aries' last smile. But he didn't grasp any of it. He didn't want to grasp it. His first days were a blur, as if his soul was lost between two timelines. His mother prepared breakfast. In the same way, with the same warmth, with the same light, resonant voice when she called him. He sat at the table and ate his breakfast. "Izuku, are you all right?" He didn't look at her, merely hummed a reply with the fork in his mouth. His mother's cooking was delicious, but he couldn't taste it, he only tasted ash. "Izuku?" His mother's anxious voice again, but he didn't answer. He figured he had school to attend, so he took his bag. "I'm going to school," he said flatly, a tone new to his voice, and left. Days continued in this manner, simply waiting to wake up from this strange dream. His heart ached every time he woke up and found this beautiful dream continuing. At school, he walked between the desks, amidst the annoying sounds, the laughter. Things that were normal before the war were now nightmares of nostalgia. He continued to live like this, drowned in memories he knew were the future, and a reality he no longer belonged to. "Deku, are you ignoring us now?" "Huh?" He didn't know how he ended up in that alley, nor did he care. Blows rained down on him, laughter mocked him, juice was spilled over his head. The same old routine. Someone hit his shoulder while another helped trip him. He fell but didn't bother to lift his head. He wasn't fully conscious, hearing echoes of a world that had already been destroyed. He didn't look at the bullies above him. He heard Kaken's voice among them, but he was afraid to look at him, afraid to see Bakugo's face and lose his composure, surrendering to these hallucinations and dreams and unleashing all his pain on them. Here they were, laughing at his dream of entering UA. The same old scenario, nearly the same words, but something inside him was shattered. Without thinking, in a faint but steady voice, he whispered, I already entered UA. Silence lasted half a second, then they burst into laughter. They mocked him, one of them kicked him, telling him to wake up from his dreams and to think seriously about his future. One word struck his heart. His future? Did he even have a future? Was there still a future to worry about? He raised his head in a moment beyond his control, and there, Bakugo's face met him, mid-laugh with his followers. In a moment of shock and longing, he uttered the nickname of the one standing over him, Kaken. Bakugo, who had been looking at one of his followers, now directed his gaze to him, a look filled with scorn. Has the cat finally got your tongue? Deku. He turned away without waiting for an answer, and his laughter with his additional followers grew until it was barely audible. Izuku hadn't raised his eyes for the previous days. He hadn't looked at anyone, not his mother, not his teachers, not any person who passed by. But now, that face and that look that truly was Bakugo, Katsuki Bakugo. That's when the realization hit him. Everything came back, or rather, became clear. The war. The dead. The screams. The voices of the heroes. The gnashing of teeth. Explosions, miming, bleeding, and destruction. A small shoe stained with blood. Eri's last smile. The world went black around him. Seconds of silent terror. Then everything disappeared. Only one thought remained in his mind, Eri. Her happiness. The childhood she deserved to live. Only in that moment did he truly start to believe that he had come back. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk, opened a new notebook, and started writing. Everything. The events that must be changed. The fronts that would open later. The people who could be saved. The points that, if ignored, would repeat the destruction. The places where small riots would explode. FO's first moves. The point where he was supposed to meet All Might. Everything. But writing wasn't enough. His body began to move on its own. He slipped out in the middle of the night, secretly from his mother, climbing rooftops, running, jumping. His small, untrained body couldn't handle it. He nearly fell more than once, felt choked, weak, powerless. And every moment of weakness tormented him more. He ran until he reached the beach. That beach where everything began, and where everything would end if he failed. He stood before the waves and punched the air with his fist. Punch, then another. Every strike carried pain, loss, regret, a stifled scream for a version of himself that had died in the future. He had to change. To become stronger. To train. To be ready. Gasping, he wiped his tears and lifted his eyes toward the dark city. One idea was clear. Mustafa needed a guardian. A ghost whose name was unknown. Someone to intervene before the disasters of the coming years began. He would need a mask. A new secret identity. First steps in a complicated game. A game he refused to lose again. As dawn approached, he stood, holding the first decision on his long path. This time, he wouldn't wait to be given power. He would forge his path before that. A new vow. He would not allow that ending to be repeated a second time. He would not allow the world to fall. He would not allow the look of exhaustion to take over his mother's face. He would not allow the ghost of fear to chase his friends. He would not allow Eri to die again. Even if he had to carry this future alone. Even if he had to become a monster. Even if he had to burn his whole life away. He approached the window, watching the city that had not yet been destroyed. And he murmured slowly, I won't repeat the mistakes. I won't lose them a second time. This time, I will break the chain before it even starts. And with that, a plan began for which the world was not prepared. Not even the heroes. Chapter 2: The Shadow Vigilante. The body he moved in now was not a body that knew these leaps, but the mind? His mind possessed a complete map of the city, of the rooftops, and of the angles he could grip onto. Whenever someone cried out for help, his feet would launch before he could even think. He was now jumping from roof to roof, landing on a window ledge, sprinting over a wall, sliding down a metal pipe, and then continuing, stitching one moment of darkness into the next. People rarely walked around after midnight, but the city never truly slept. Some were returning from work, others were late with friends, cats were stuck in trees, and petty thefts occurred. And all of them found him there before danger could reach them. Tonight, he was restraining a man who tried to rob an exhausted woman returning from a long shift. After immobilizing the thief and tying him with a plastic cable, he turned to the victim. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. She nodded but remained tense, as if terror had seized the air out of her. Her eyes were fixed on him. He knew how he must look right now. A gas mask concealed the lower half of his face. A black hoodie cast shadows over his eyes. A jacket of the same color bore neon green stripes that looked as if they had come from a thrift store and been restitched by him. Small in stature, but somehow intimidating. He extended his hand. "May I use your phone?" She offered it to him with a trembling hand. He pressed numbers he knew well. The line rang twice. "Detective Tsuka." He cut him off with a cheerful voice unfitting for the situation. "My favorite police officer. I'll send you a cookie sometime." A clear groan sounded from the other end. "I've sent you my location. The victim is here, and the criminal is tied up. See you later." Before Tsukachi could respond, Izuku hung up on him. The phone was returned to the woman's hand with unexpected gentleness. He approached her and crouched down to her level. "Don't worry, the danger is over." His eyes, despite the mask, held something reassuring. Her breathing slowly began to stabilize. "That's it, just look at me." He smiled, though it was only visible in the reflection of his eyes. He sat beside her, waiting for the police, and whispered, "Let's play a simple game, it helps calm the nerves." She offered a slight, shaky nod in agreement. "Tell me something you can touch." Her voice faltered slightly but came out, "The ground." He looked at her hand resting on the ground, hoping she hadn't been injured when she fell. "Something you can smell?" "Dirt." He nodded in agreement. Yes, the smell was clear here, dust, humidity, and the remnants of smoke from the street. "And now, something you can see." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Green." She answered without thinking, then corrected herself nervously, "I mean, the green color of your eyes." He was surprised for a moment, but the smile returned. That was the first natural sound he'd heard from her since the beginning. The sound of police sirens reached his ears. He stood up. "It seems your tension is starting to fade." She nodded. "The police have arrived. You will be fine." He waited for nothing else. He jumped toward the wall, gripped small protrusions, and quickly climbed until he disappeared over the rooftop. When the police appeared in the alley, the woman saw him waving to her from above. She raised her hand, waving back to him without realizing it. He didn't stop. He kept running on the rooftops toward his next target. He knew his destination tonight. He didn't stop until his feet landed in front of a bar buried deep within the underbelly of the criminal world. The most infamous bar among the city's criminals, the place where information intersected like the threads of a giant spider's web. He entered. Whispers erupted. "The new vigilante. What's his name?" Short, but annoying. He ignored the whispers. He knew where he was going. He sat down across from a man with messy white hair, sharp features, and eyes that missed nothing. This man was Jiren, the deepest expert in information networks, the man who knew everything happening in the dark. He knew that this man, in less than a year, would become the primary supplier for the League of Villains. In the future, he might have to stop him, but for now, he was exploiting everything that could benefit his plans. Currently, he put his trust in the fact that Jiren was a pragmatic merchant with principles Izuku respected, a merchant of the underworld. Jiren raised an eyebrow. "You're late." Izuku sighed. "I ran into some drunkards." Jiren chuckled, then pushed a glass of something toward him. Izuku didn't touch it. "Did you get what I asked for?" Jiren pulled out a file and pushed it toward him. Izuku opened it and saw the name on the first page. He had been searching for him for weeks with no result. He had begun to expect the worst, that AFO's hands had already reached him. And Jiren had found him in less than a week, of course, with the help of Izuku's information about him. "Your request was extremely difficult, and I expect good compensation." Without a word, Izuku pushed another file toward him. Jiren's expression changed. He recognized this type of file. A complete analysis of the vulnerabilities of a small gang, not dangerous, but irritating a gang that had begun to support the hero commission, revealing the underworld's secrets to them on the condition that their own crimes were overlooked. This had earned them enemies on both sides, and the vigilante in front of him must realize that. This information will fetch you a good price. A gang that betrays the underworld will certainly have people aiming to take them down. Izuku's method of analysis was like a surgeon's knife, precise, ruthless, and unerring, and Jiren had witnessed this with every file that preceded the one in his hand. At the very least, he knew this vigilante's information was accurate. Jiren smiled widely. I like this collaboration. I look forward to our next meeting, you brilliant analyst. Izuku didn't respond. He stood up, collected his file, and left without looking back. He walked out into the street, and the cold air hit the mask on his face. These nights, he knew well that they were the start of a chain of irreversible changes. And every step he took now would carve out a completely different future even before he entered UA. He was ready to carry all the consequences of that on his shoulders. Inko didn't know exactly the moment her son changed, but she felt it. Sometimes people change suddenly. A look in the eye, a way of standing, a silence that lasts too long. And Izuku, her only son, was no longer the child who ran to her every evening to tell her about his day. He was present, yes. But something in him remained absent, as if a heavy shadow sat upon his small shoulders. Every morning, she pretended not to notice how he avoided looking at her. And at night, she pretended not to hear the faint tremor in his breathing. She also pretended not to notice his avoidance of allowing her to hug him before he left. Little by little, her heart began to grow heavy with fear. One night, as she was checking the doors before bed, she heard something faint. A step? A movement? Something passing by his bedroom door. Izuku! She knocked, but there was no reply. She opened the door cautiously. The room was empty. The window was half open, and the curtains moved with the cold wind. The blood froze in her veins. Izuku! No one was there. She stood in the middle of the room, her heart pounding like war drums, trying not to break down into the silence. Was this her son? Was he sneaking out in the middle of the night? Since when? And what? She retreated with slow steps to the living room and sat on the couch, waiting, praying, trembling. An hour, 2 hours, and time kept passing while she waited. Dawn was nearly breaking, but Izuku was nowhere. When she finally heard the window open again, she stood up immediately. She found him silently jumping inside, sweaty, exhausted, but he froze when he saw her. His eyes widened like a child caught stealing a piece of candy. But he wasn't a guilty child, he was a scared person. She slowly approached him, as if any sudden movement might break him. Izuku, where were you? He didn't reply. His lips trembled, and his hands lifted slightly before dropping as if they had lost strength. Why are you going out the window? Why are you avoiding me? Did I do something that made you afraid of me? Her voice came out small, pleading, choked. He lifted his head with difficulty, and in a husky voice, he said, Insomnia, I can't sleep, so I go out for a walk. She didn't believe him, but she didn't question him. The fear was greater than the doubt. She moved closer, gently touching his cheek with a trembling hand. I'm worried about you, you look burdened, my love, as if something is chasing you. She saw him bite his lip, his eyes focused on a place other than where they were. Mom. He whispered, but she heard him. She nodded, waiting for him to continue. Will you keep standing by me no matter what happens? The core of her being ached. It was clear her son was looking for anyone who could promise they wouldn't leave, as if he had already lost everything once. She never meant it, never thought it. She didn't let him wait and answered him. Yes, yes, my darling, I won't go anywhere. How could I leave you? You are all I have. She continued to cry. She didn't know why, but she was sad. Her son was suffering, and she didn't know the reason. And indeed, at those words, he broke down. Not with sound, nor with sobs, but with a silent collapse. His tears slid down his cheeks without resistance, as if they had been waiting for this moment to escape. She reached out and pulled him into her embrace, holding him as she used to when he was small. I'm here, Do you hear me? I'm with you, no matter what is bothering you. I'm with you. He trembled in her arms, but he didn't speak. He was so afraid of himself, of his memory, and of a past that was no longer the past. After long minutes, once he had calmed down a little, she whispered softly, "Come, would you help me in the kitchen? Let's stay together for a little while, what do you think?" He agreed silently. In the kitchen, the sound of water, the clinking of dishes, and the gentle scent of food covered the sound of worry between them. She watched him from the corner of her eye. His shoulders were slumped, his breaths were heavy, and his eyes. His eyes no longer looked like a child's. Finally she said, "I'll book an appointment with a doctor. Insomnia is not a simple matter, we need to check." But his voice rose for the first time. "No." She turned to him, shocked. He continued quickly, with a scared, hesitant voice. "Please. I don't need a doctor." She fell silent. Then she gently placed her fingers on his hand. "All right, on one condition." He raised his head slightly. "You want to go out at night? Fine. But, please, send me a message every hour at least, so I know you are safe." His features softened for a moment, a brief but genuine moment. He nodded in agreement. "I love you, Izuku. Whatever you are going through, I am here." His tears streamed down again. Not out of fear this time, but out of longing for a mother he had lost in a future that no longer existed. And so, the following nights began with Inko sitting in the living room, waiting for his short texts. "I'm fine. Just walking. Don't worry." But she knew that her son was carrying something bigger than insomnia. Something she hadn't yet found the courage to ask him about. Chapter 3: An Ally? The night was not as heavy as usual, but it was tense. The city held its breath after the collapse of the small gang that had operated as a shadow for the Hero Commission. The report of their downfall spread with unusual speed, and as expected, the journalistic questions he had aimed to provoke began circulating, allowing the first signs of doubt to creep in. Why did the Hero Commission ignore this gang? What was it aiming for by covering it up? Could heroes truly be trusted? There are many holes in the commission's system, isn't it time for a change? That night, Izuku stood atop an abandoned building, observing the distant lights. The wind ruffled the edge of his black hood, and his breathing was still ragged from his previous fight. He realized he had ignited a war with a side that shouldn't be trifled with, but he didn't regret it. "That's one," he whispered to himself. "Many more remain." A quiet, almost musical voice sliced through the darkness behind him. What a performance! A mere boy declaring war on corruption with the audacity of a master thief. He finally showed himself, Izuku thought. He turned slowly. A man wearing a long-nosed theatrical mask stood on the edge of the roof, bowing as if on a stage and not 30 meters in the air. His coat fluttered with dignity, and his eyes behind the mask glittered with fatal curiosity. "Mr. Compress?" Izuku whispered without surprise. He had expected him to appear before or after Izuku entered the underworld, but not this quickly, and not directly in front of him. Compress placed his hand on his chest and bowed lightly. "I am honored that you know me, little ghost." Izuku did not reply. His body was tense, his hands trembling with exhaustion. But Compress raised his palm as if asking for calm. "No need to fret. If I had wanted to hurt you, you would be in my pocket by now." He wiggled his fingers lightly. Silence. Then he approached a step, with the lightness of a circus dancer, studying the boy before. "Tell me, how does a short man like yourself manage to topple an officially protected gang and completely evade the eyes of the police?" He let out a small laugh. "That is the kind of boldness I only see the great ones possess." Izuku averted his gaze. He didn't want the men of the underworld clinging to him. But Compress continued, his voice more serious this time. "You are not against heroes, you are against corruption." That single sentence made Izuku's breath hitch. Compress crouched beside him, the mask gleaming under the moonlight. "And that, my boy, is reason enough for me to keep watching you." He pulled something small from his pocket, a small metal piece bearing an unknown symbol. "If you ever need help that is not recorded in the registers, break this." Izuku did not reach out. Compress smiled beneath the mask. I knew you wouldn't take it now. You trust no one, and I like that. Nevertheless, he tossed it toward him, and Izuku involuntarily stopped it from falling, catching it in his hands. Compress turned his back, jumped toward the edge of the roof, and said before disappearing into the air, "Until our paths cross again, new vigilante. You are making waves, and people like me love to ride the current." Izuku remained alone. He looked at the spot where Compress had disappeared, then slowly raised the piece in his hand near the light. The object resembled a slice of dark alloy glazed with a silver layer, neither gold nor steel, but a material he didn't recognize. Near the thin line that divided it, he noticed something like a faint inner sheen, as if a thread of fine, powdered dust was trapped between the two layers. He ran his thumb over the line, feeling that its surface was precise and deliberate, not decoration but a purposeful mechanism for breaking. He lifted it higher, and in that moment realized it wasn't just a symbol, but a dormant, non-electronic, untraceable emergency tool, exactly what someone working in the shadows would need. If it breaks, who hears the signal? He didn't know, but he knew one thing. Compress gives nothing without meaning. Rage was not something Mr. Compress often experienced. He was a man of the stage, a showman, accustomed to the lights, to controlling the rhythm. But that night, standing atop a half-collapsed building and watching police cars surround the headquarters of the corrupt gang, he felt a slap to his ego. What a farce! He muttered to himself, crossing his arms. He had spent weeks observing that small gang, a gang indirectly protected by the Hero Commission, providing them cover in exchange for dirty work the Commission didn't want to acknowledge. Compress was planning to take them down in a dramatic fashion. A full show, a powerful strike that would expose the corruption of authority to everyone. He had the plan, and he was waiting for the right moment. But someone walked in before he raised the curtain. Voices in the underworld whispered. Inside information came out suddenly, with details, with a map, and even the weak points. Information that only someone more precise than him could obtain. The question repeated in his head relentlessly. Compress didn't like having his show stolen. He wouldn't accept anyone snatching the stage before his entrance. So he spent the following days tracking rumors. All voices pointed to a short figure, moving over rooftops, wearing a gas mask and a black hood, intervening at night like a ghost, helping people, and leaving the police scrambling to explain the emergence of a new vigilante. The new vigilante, a name he disliked, a name without flair. But the man himself, he aroused curiosity more than anger. So much so that he decided to meet him. And here he stood now, on the edge of a building, opposite that short black shadow who had altered the course of the underworld in a short time. Compress smiled beneath his long mask. His voice came out smooth, enjoying the moment. What a performance, a mere boy declaring war on corruption. A man who managed to do what many seasoned players couldn't, and in a theatrical way that deserved respect. Who was this? Why did he move in secret? And why did he ask for no reward? Most importantly, why did Compress see that dangerous glint in his eyes? The glint of someone who wants to overturn the entire game, not just a part of it. When he gave him the metal piece that symbolized an illicit connection, he didn't do it out of loyalty, but out of curiosity. Who are you? Vigilante? Compress muttered after the short shadow disappeared over the rooftops. The answer he didn't know yet. But one thing was certain. The real show hadn't started yet. 2 weeks passed, and Compress watched the vigilante from afar. He saw. He doesn't kill. He doesn't take money or rewards. He doesn't threaten his victims. He saves the innocent regardless of their background. He helps the police but doesn't trust them. He moves with fear, as if he is someone who knows what it means to lose everything. His surveillance confirmed a critical detail for Compress. The vigilante isn't a villain, but he's no hero either. Crucially, he belongs nowhere. And that in itself was an attractive idea to Compress, because he hated both systems. The corrupt heroes, and the foolish villains who destroy everything without meaning. But he was still unconvinced. After 3 weeks of observing the vigilante, the night was cold, and the city was half asleep. Izuku stood atop an old water tank on a rooftop, bandaging his torn forearm from a previous mission. From behind him, light, steady, confident footsteps could be heard. This was no thief, no common criminal. It was Compress. I've watched you long enough to write a play about your nightly habits. Izuku turned slightly, but didn't drop his guard. If you're here to fight, I don't have time. Compress laughed, a short, not boisterous laugh as he was accustomed to. Fighting you? You are not a fit enemy for me, Vigilante. He moved closer, standing on the same edge. I was looking for one reason to make you worthy of attention, but I found 10. Izuku remained silent. You operate outside the law, but you don't love it. You confront villains, but you are not a hero. You save the innocent, but you don't expect thanks. Then he looked at him with a deep gaze, the gaze of a man who has seen much. People like you are rare. I am not threatening you, but I warn you, the systems will not accept you. He paused, looking at the distant horizon, then continued in a steady voice. And these systems are what I want to bring down. This is where the seriousness in his voice appeared for the first time. I don't join the heroes. Nor do I work with the fools who call themselves villains. But you are something different. Compress pulled out a small ball, his signature marble, tossed it up and caught it. I offer you a deal I offer no one. Cooperation, not subservience. Information for information. Clear goals, no chaos. Izuku froze, because he recognized the danger of this proposal, but he also needed allies. He asked in a calm voice, "And why me?" Compress smiled beneath the mask. "Because you seek to change the world. And I despise the world as it stands." Then he rested his hand under his chin, thinking mockingly, "Also, you possess information that I cannot find anywhere until it appears with Jiren. Seriously, how do you gather your intelligence?" Izuku didn't answer him, and Compress didn't expect him to. "What will you offer me in return for that?" Izuku was wary. He hadn't expected this move. He hadn't expected Compress to show up before he sought him out himself. And the memories of the future didn't paint the best impression of him. Compress thought of an answer that wouldn't expose him while maintaining the theatrical mood around him. "I am strong, rich too, what else? You are a descendant of an ancient family fighting against corruption in government and authority." Izuku interrupted him. "The grandson of Harima the Great. The unparalleled thief, Aji Harima." This time, Izuku stopped wrapping the bandage on his forearm and looked up at Compress's mask, as if he knew the exact features beneath it. "Isn't that right?" Compress took a step back, looking down at the Guardian's dead eyes, listening to his steady voice as if he hadn't just uttered his grandfather's name, as if he hadn't just admitted to knowing more about Compress than Compress knew about himself. He swallowed. This was truly wonderful. He enjoyed this play. It thrilled him and gave him a kind of intoxicating addiction he didn't want to let go of. He was certain he wouldn't find this kind of pleasure anywhere else. He extended his hand calmly, without any theatrics, his voice filled with pure excitement. "Let's change this world together, Vigilante." I didn't expect the gang to collapse so quickly. All I had were mere fragments of information. Pictures, times, places, partial names. I imagined they would need months to prove their corruption, but help someone beat. As I watched the investigations broadcast on the news, a strange feeling crept into my chest. This isn't my work alone. Someone was breathing over my shoulder. The first time Compress started observing him was the night one of those gangs whose information he leaked to the police, or to Jiren, perhaps both, fell. Since then, he began to feel someone tracking him and spying on his actions, a short man, wearing an exaggerated mask, a long, opulent coat in a theatrical way. He started as a strange optical illusion walking on 2 feet. I didn't succeed in reading his face, nor the intention in his eyes behind the mask, but when he finally revealed himself, he spoke with the voice of someone angry because his show had been stolen. I didn't understand what he meant then, nor why he thought the information I provided was not similar to the cheap version he had quietly gathered himself. His appearance was brief. He disappeared quickly, leaving behind one impression. I am not the only one playing this game. After that night, after gaining what? An unexpected ally? A partner? He still didn't know, he still couldn't believe what had happened. In any case, the small war had begun, Izuku thought. The Hero Commission started paying attention to me, observing, doubting, trying to find out the new name that had begun turning the poor neighborhoods upside down. And the gangs that the commission used to ignore or collect protection money from became my first targets. They will send a hero after me soon, but that won't stop me. Nothing can stop me now. The nights became routine. Observation, exposure, quick strikes, handing over evidence to Jiren, then disappearing. And the day was the complete opposite. On the beach, amidst the piles of trash and rusty scrap, I dragged my body like a heavy, empty bag. Simple training, small movements, light weightlifting, everything was exhausting to a ridiculous degree. Before returning in time, I was fighting the strongest villains, flying, almost breaking mountains. And now I could barely lift a pile of plastic without my hands shaking. Weakness clung to me with the smell of salt, reminding me that strength takes time, and I am not good at waiting. I sat in the middle of the beach, which was now half clean, and took a biscuit from the bag given to me by an elderly neighbor who thought I was a good young man helping the neighborhood. I looked at the file I got from Jiren and pulled out the papers inside, many disturbing pictures, all of the same person. White hair with burned ends. A face full of scars. Signs of fighting on his hands. And in the last pictures, black hair. A sharper look. I frowned. I knew this transformation well. But not the Dabi I knew in the future. Here, he is still just a fugitive young man. Wounded. Dangerous. Hiding in the outskirts of South Tokyo. The information stated he sometimes stole, hit anyone who approached him, disappeared for days, then showed up in a new fight. More dangerous than all of this. He is only 60 kilometers away from Mustafu. One train ride. And according to the timing, FO won't need much time to find him. I made sure Jiren wouldn't give the information I requested to anyone but me, but caution is necessary. I put the papers back in place. I couldn't ignore the feeling pressing on my chest. If I don't reach him now, he will be lost again. This time, forever. I stood up with difficulty, my body screaming in protest. But I don't have the luxury of listening to it. I clenched my fist, picked up my small bag, and took a deep breath. I won't allow another mistake. Then I started walking. Chapter 4 No longer alone. He wasn't supposed to be here. Kids his age should be in school at this hour, not wandering the streets of South Tokyo searching for a criminal whom the heroes themselves supposedly fear approaching well, not a dangerous criminal yet. Izuku walked with hesitant steps, his backpack slung over his shoulder, his pale green shirt, and a face worn out from a sleepless night. He tried not to draw attention, pretending to be just a lost teenager looking for a store or a train station. The neighborhood was loud, cramped, and filled with heavy stale breaths. The walls were covered in graffiti, the metal doors were so low they threatened the heads of passers-by, and the smell was a mixture of smoke and neglect. He stopped at the junction of two alleys, looking at a picture on his phone, a photo of a young man with a scarred face and cold eyes. He had only taken pictures instead of carrying the entire file. He scouted every location where each photo was taken, praying he wasn't too late. He was tense. These neighborhoods brought back memories he hated, memories of their crushing defeat. Tokyo might be a bustling city, but its alleys and suburbs held enough secrets to destroy all of Japan. He swallowed, remembering everything connected to it, from the orphanage to the hospital to the hideouts, to the area that was the starting point for everything in the war, a war he did not intend to repeat. He hoped he wouldn't be useless, that he wouldn't waste what others had striven to give him. He had returned, yes, but that didn't mean his failures and defeats would be erased. He felt invisible scars digging into his skin, and hands holding him, calling out his ominous destiny. He survived. They didn't. He didn't deserve it. He didn't deserve anything from them, yet they gave him everything, and he disappointed them, crushing himself utterly. A crashing sound snapped him out of his thoughts. Then he heard a groan followed by nervous curses. He approached with light steps and hid behind a metal trash bin. In the heart of the alley, a group was fighting, a group of men against one young man. The lone figure was thin, standing before the group indifferent to their siege, his hands in his pants pockets. His posture was frighteningly threatening. His dirty black hair dangled over his scarred face. And his eyes, even from a distance, held something like a deadly spark. One of the men grabbed him by the collar of his coat, while the other raised a knife. "You owe us, you scoundrel! How long will you keep delaying the payment, thinking you'll get away with it?" Dabi slowly raised his head, his gaze empty, murderous. "I told you, approach me again, and you'll see hell." His voice was faint but carried a threat. One of them moved to stab him, but before the knife could reach, a small thing darted in from the edge of the alley. Izuku. He didn't think. He didn't plan. Just a body moved by an almost hateful instinct. One kick from him to the man's hand sent the knife flying toward the corner. Izuku looked at him sharply, shouting, "Stop now!" The enemies were annoyed and looked at him suspiciously, but they gathered around him threateningly, ready to attack, and he took a fighting stance too. One of the men laughed. "Look, another idiot came to die on his own feet." But what the men didn't notice was that Dabi had moved. Not with superhuman speed, but simply a step forward and a hand raised. A blue flame ignited in a small, quiet, terrifying moment. The men screamed and recoiled, running out of the alley as fast as they could. With the fire's disappearance, Dabi's harshness faded, but his gaze remained fixed. Dabi turned slowly, almost in slow motion, to the stranger who had barged into the scene. It was the first time Izuku had seen his face up close. His scars, his dry skin, and frightfully steady blue eyes. He approached. He stopped in front of him, the height difference obvious. His shadow covered Izuku's face. "Why did you do this?" The question was cold, unthankful, unangry, just surprised. As if Dabi couldn't believe anyone would intervene for him. Izuku finally realized his position. His instinct had made him forget he had entered the alley. "I don't know. I didn't think just. That's obvious." Dabi cut him off dryly, then looked around to make sure the men were gone. "Because you're an idiot." Izuku gave a small smile, a phantom memory of a familiar insult. "Maybe." Dabi silently walked away, heading toward the isolated streets away from passers-by. The sound of distant cars echoed between the walls. Izuku could feel the residual heat in the air even though it had vanished from his hands. Dabi turned his back. "Don't follow me." He said it as he walked away. But Izuku didn't listen. He looked at Dabi's trembling hands, then raised his head. "You don't look well." Dabi stopped. Then he laughed. A short, sharp sound, a choked laugh of sarcasm and despair. "Half my body is burned, genius. How exactly do you expect me to look fine?" He didn't wait for an answer, he started walking. Izuku didn't stop following him. Dabi turned again, annoyed, a murderous, wary gaze, burning from the inside. "Stop following me. You don't know me. I know more than you think," Izuku said in a low voice, afraid, but steady. Dabi expected him to shout or beg to talk to him, but he just followed in silence. Steady steps, even though he limped slightly from exhaustion. After a few streets, they entered an area where time seemed to have stopped, half-finished buildings, bare concrete, rusty scaffolding. Dabi climbed a metal ladder and entered an apartment that barely had a door, its walls exposed, its floor covered in dust. A place inhabited by no one, except those who have nowhere else. Izuku hesitated for a moment, then climbed after him. He could hear conversations here and there, someone leaving a room and another entering it. This part of the city, these buildings, they were the cheap apartments. He looked around in surprise and worry before asking, "Do you live here?" Dabi didn't answer. He sat near the open window, staring listlessly at the street. Then, in a low voice, he said, "Aren't you supposed to be in school?" Izuku sat across from him, pulling his bag to his side. I guess I'm playing hooky." Dabi slowly raised an eyebrow, then for the first time, looked intently at Izuku. The fatigue on his face was obvious, but his innocence and baby fat revealed how young he was young, but not young enough to follow anyone who offered him candy. Dabi hadn't offered him anything at all, he just followed. Then he said suddenly, "Your face is awful." Izuku wasn't insulted. He knew how he looked. Bloodshot eyes from staying up late, sunken cheeks, scratches on his forearms. His clothes dirty from cleaning the beach in the morning and facing gangs at night. He replied calmly, "I know." Then he looked directly at Dabi and said, "Look who's talking." Dabi froze for a moment, then smiled a small, dead, but genuine smile for the first time. The scene was funny, almost tragic. They both looked like they had fled a massacre. Izuku said, trying to break the silence, "Anyway, my name is Izuku Midoriya." Silence. A cold wind passed through the window, moving Dabi's hair strands. "Dabi," he finally said, in a faint tone. Izuku nodded. "Nickname? Call me Deku then." Dabi raised his gaze sharply. "Did you just make that nickname up?" But Izuku didn't answer him. He just remained seated as if he was ready to hear what Dabi would never say. And then, for the first time since returning to the past, Izuku felt he was not entirely alone. It was no longer just about following Dabi in the streets. Izuku began visiting the place regularly, in the morning or afternoon when the street was quiet. Initially, he would sit in the corner or on the old bed, scrolling through his phone, observing Dabi's movements with calm, non-intrusive eyes. Then he started making simple modifications to the room. He extended the bed space by adding wooden pieces, and added an old blanket he gathered from a place only he knew. He placed a small lamp near the window, emitting a warm glow at night. He collected books and leftover magazines from abandoned shelves and placed them so Dabi could easily reach them. Dabi noticed the changes in silence. He didn't say anything, but he started to notice that the place felt more alive, despite all the wreckage around it. Gradually, it became common for Dabi to find Izuku lying on his bed, scrolling through his phone or writing notes, as if the natural presence of this short boy with the notebook and pen had become part of his life. Dabi felt a strange mixture of comfort and suspicion. There was something about Deku that couldn't be put into words. He was always present, but he didn't seem like a stalker, nor did he pressure him with words, nor did he ask about his past. Yet, every time Dabi returned to the room, he found this person waiting, ready to listen, ready to remain silent if necessary. Something must be wrong, crossed his mind every time he saw Izuku. Does he seem haunted? Maybe he intends something dangerous? Or is he involved in something bigger than he can reveal? But this suspicion, combined with all the small changes in the room, and every time he found Izuku waiting without judgment or pressure, made Dabi hesitant to utter anything. The fear of losing this hope, this person who gave him a sense of identity, was greater than the curiosity to know everything about him. One day, Dabi returned from a minor fight with a local gang, sitting in his room exhausted. He was surprised when he noticed something placed near the bed, a container of food and a warm blanket. He raised his head to see Izuku sitting leaning against the wall, watching quietly, as if he knew exactly what he needed without asking. "What is this?" Dabi asked, his voice laden with suspicion. He wasn't really hungry. If he wanted food, he would have bought it before returning, and he didn't need the warm blanket if he preferred sleeping in his usual spot. His body couldn't even feel the cold. Izuku smiled a light smile, carrying no sarcasm, but something deeper, silent concern. "I bought it from a nearby food stand. I thought I'd like to eat it with someone." Dabi sat, looking at the food container in his hands. It was soba, one of his favorite dishes. He scanned the soup, checking instinctively for any sign of poison or a trap. He used the chopsticks cautiously, every bite carrying a strange thought in his head. When was the last time he truly ate this dish? He would die tonight. Silence filled the room, but Izuku's voice broke it, quiet. "You seem to like it." Dabi replied with a without looking at his face, and continued eating, confused between his usual suspicion and the strange warmth he felt for the first time in days. Then he whispered to himself, "There are no food stands nearby in this area." Dabi looked at the strange boy, and there was something in that moment. Something in Izuku's silence, in his waiting, in his indirect concern, that made Dabi's heart relax for the first time in a long time. A strange feeling, one he hadn't known before. A feeling that someone was watching him, not providing protection, but giving him a chance to be just a boy, without a mask, without wounds, without a past chasing him. This is where the real interest in Izuku began, not just suspicion, but curiosity and a kind of reliance, a feeling that his presence might be something he never expected. And so, Dabi began looking forward to Deku's visits, not just to observe what information he brought, but for his presence itself, and for a safety he hadn't experienced in a long time. In the following days, Izuku's visits became semi-routine. Dabi no longer flinched at his sudden presence in the room, nor did he act uncomfortably as before. Just like now, Izuku sat on the edge of the rickety bed, scrolling through his phone, while Dabi watched him from the corner, sitting on the floor. "Why, do you always come here?" Dabi finally asked, his voice low but tense. "Because the place seems quiet, and I think quiet is good sometimes." Izuku answered calmly without looking directly at him, then added with a small smile, "And also, I like seeing how you make this place look less gloomy." Dabi wiped his hand on his trousers. He didn't reply. He felt something strange. This boy didn't pressure, didn't ask, but he was always there. Izuku noticed Dabi's silence, so he reached out and placed a cup of water on the rickety table beside him. "Thanks," Dabi muttered, his tone closer to surprise than gratitude. "You're welcome, just don't tire yourself out too much," Izuku replied, and finally looked at him. "Is everything all right today?" Dabi moved closer to the cup, took a small sip, but didn't turn to him. After a moment, he whispered, "Nothing, just a fight with some thugs." "I see," Izuku said, smiling slightly. "Everything is fine as long as you came back here. The place is safe." Dabi couldn't stop himself from staring at the small changes Izuku had begun introducing to the room. The blanket on the bed, the lamp, the books, everything seemed as if someone knew what he needed before he knew it himself. "Where did you get all this?" Dabi asked, finally raising his voice slightly with a small, faint smile. "From here and there, just something that can make the place feel familiar," Izuku replied, looking at the books, then added, "Sometimes just a small change can completely change how we feel." Dabi shook his head, still skeptical. "You're always here. Are you a stalker or something?" Izuku shrugged with a small smile, neither denying nor answering directly. "Let's just say I like watching the place, that's all I need." There was a long silence, filled with surprise and curiosity in Dabi's eyes. But he felt something strange, safety. The presence of someone who waited for him without judgment, without questions, without pressure, something he hadn't known for a long time. Izuku continued leaving small things for him with every visit. A book on the table, or even a short note with something encouraging or reassuring. He didn't know why, but he began to feel like he was no longer alone. Dabi sat on the floor, contemplating the small notes Izuku left in the room, while feeling something he wasn't used to, a sense of trust toward a stranger, a feeling that someone was watching him without judgment or pressure, just caring. "I guess you're the only person I can trust a little now," Dabi said in a low voice, more to himself than to Izuku. "I guess I will keep coming here," Izuku whispered, his voice softer than ever. Dabi settled for a half-smile, saying nothing, and Izuku, lying on the floor beside him, scribbled in his notebook, but understood perfectly. This was the moment Dabi began to trust him. From here, Dabi's interest began to turn from suspicion to curiosity, then to cautious trust. Izuku, for his part, noticed every small interaction, every look, every signal, and began charting his next steps in his mind. He circled the most important word describing his next move in his plan, writing it in his notebook and repeating the line of the circle over and over, overhaul. The next step would truly be painful for Izuku. What he was planning next was not easy at all. But if he wanted to achieve his goal, he had to endure, and he was a master of pain. The moon was faint, and the city was half asleep and half expectant of the new vigilante whose name was beginning to spread in the shadows. Izuku stood on the edge of the building, the phone light reflecting on his face. He typed a short message to his mother. "I'm fine. I'll be back before dawn. Love you." Before he could hit send, Compress appeared behind him, as if he had materialized from a shadow that hadn't existed moments before. "Oh, I always find you on the verge of falling off a building," he said with an exaggerated smile. Izuku didn't turn around but replied with his usual calm. "Hello." Then he followed up immediately. "I need your help." Compress raised an eyebrow with exaggerated surprise. "Oh, do you trust me that quickly?" Izuku exhaled through his nose, turning his head slightly towards him, a clear side glance and coldness in his eyes. "If you're expecting something in return, say it now." Compress chuckled, then lightly jumped to sit on the rooftop railing, making a theatrical gesture with his hand as if starting a new show. "Actually, I was looking for you too." It was only then that Izuku fully turned around. A step back, his phone returned to his pocket, and his chin slightly raised in a sign of interest. Compress continued, tapping his heel lightly on the railing with slight nervousness. "There's an underground fighting ring. Secret and illegal, obviously." But his tone changed, becoming deeper. "It's bigger than just a fight. The government knows, but they don't move. The person in control there is so strong that they pretend not to see him." Izuku's jaw tensed. A short flicker in his eyes. He recognized that description and started connecting the dots. Then he spoke in a low, emotionless voice. "Is it in Osaka?" Compress froze as if someone had pulled the ground from under him. "How?" Izuku took a step forward, his shoulders rising slightly as if his body demanded the answer. "The underground masquerade?" "Huh." A sound escaped Compress in a comically soft, low tone. Izuku repeated the question, this time with a focused look in his eyes, a brief motion resembling a detective observing a confused witness. "The arena's name is the Underground Masquerade, right?" Long seconds passed for Compress before he spoke. "Are you a monster? How did you know that? What led you there?" Izuku blinked slowly, a clear look of annoyance. He didn't like being called a monster, but he ignored it. "Stay away from that place." He moved his hand, a small but sharp gesture. "Intervening now is a mistake. Dealing with them requires strength on par with All Might. You are not at that level." Compress felt insulted, but in a way that made him smile instead of getting angry. Discouraging people isn't usually a trait of vigilantes. What frightens you? Here, Izuku rested his palms on the edge of the building, his body leaning slightly forward, concentration gathering into a single, harsh look, as if remembering something he didn't want to recall. "I need more evidence, and I need a specific hero with me. I haven't brought him to my side yet. When that happens, we will move." Compress replied, raising his hands in surrender. Fine. Just don't make me a token partner. I want to know later." Izuku nodded once. "Quite, but a promise." After a moment of silence, Compress said with a mischievous smile, "By the way, I heard you got a nickname. Congratulations?" Izuku's eyebrow rose half a centimeter, just half. This was his move when he questioned something. "Nickname?" Compress spread his arms like announcing a circus act. "The phantom who moves between the shadows, strikes, and is never seen, and if he sets his eye on a target, he won't rest until he hunts it down, the sniper." Izuku turned his face away, his hand rubbing his neck tiredly. "Great, another bad nickname added to my list of bad titles." Compress laughed. "If you chose your own title, this wouldn't have happened." Says the one who named himself after his quirk. Izuku did not hold back the sarcasm. Compress ignored the jab with a steady smile, then leaned forward with shining eyes. "Speaking of which, what do you think of my quirk, Mr. Analyst? Any comment?" Izuku didn't hesitate. He didn't even think. Just one look that, "Your quirk is amazing." The air around them stopped for a second. Compress opened his mouth slightly as if he'd lost the ability to act. Izuku continued, gesturing with small, precise movements, as if drawing the quirk's shape in the air. Compression, transformation, compression, release. He started muttering as he usually did. "The focus is visual. The reaction time is high. Your quirk relies on mental DSPLN and visual speed. The problem isn't its power, but its timing. You use it for showmanship, not as a weapon." Compress exclaimed lightly. Because it's part of the show. Izuku raised his finger again. Yet it can be developed. Then he began tracing the air with quick movements. Compressing an entire opponent. Compressing an explosion. Compressing a bullet. Compressing specific quirks. Releasing with doubled force. Transportation. Entering small spaces. Creating a defensive compression. Compress's eyes widened. That's possible, very possible. Izuku raised his finger. But what if you combined it with long-range attacks? What if you made the compressed item change size moments before release? If you stop an opponent, their entire body inside one marble, would you be able to stop their quirk when activated? If a building explodes, can you compress the debris before it falls? What if you secretly transported your comrades if you wanted to bring them into a place you could enter alone? Or had to move them from one room to another through a small opening? That's a lot. This is only the beginning. Then Izuku whispered. You can also compress the attacks themselves, energy blasts, bullets, even some quirks, and release them with doubled force. Compress stood up, captivated, half excited and half frightened by the amount of knowledge this masked young man possessed. My God, that's more than I expected. Even more than I wanted. He coughed slightly, thinking. So, what do you want, my vigilante friend? Izuku turned to him, remembering the beginning of the conversation. He had completely forgotten in his moment of excitement. Get me an apartment. Or any habitable and safe place. Compress froze. Are you being hunted? But Izuku shook his head. Not me. Compress paused. While Izuku continued, it's for a friend. Then he said in a serious tone. And I don't want you to talk about my identity as a vigilante in front of him, or to ask me about him, just provide the place. Compress was silent for a moment, then raised his hands. Oh, all right, sorry. My God, you're good at asking. Izuku took out another piece of paper. Dabi's address. This person? Bring him after you prepare the place. Compress looked at the name, then the address, then into the vigilante's eyes. You never hesitate to state a request like that. Fine, I'll do it. Izuku turned, ready to jump, then paused again, only half-turned, and a kind of embarrassment appeared in his voice after thinking his request might have been too much. I'll pay you later. Compress laughed, raising his hand. No need. He smiled. I got more than I wanted. He pointed to his head. One verbal analysis from you is worth gold. Then, with a wider smile. I can't imagine what it would look like if it were formal. Izuku paused for a moment, then jumped off the rooftop to disappear into the darkness. And Compress remained standing, laughing. Oh guys, if the neighbors knew what this scoundrel owns, they'd pay all their fortune to buy it. Dabi was slowly getting used to Izuku's presence in his life. For weeks, it had become almost normal. He'd return to his dark apartment, find the only light on, and Izuku sitting on his bed, scrolling through a 5-year-old phone, or writing something in his notebook, or leaving him simple meals like rice and vegetables with a piece of meat, because your body needs protein, Dabi. But all that suddenly stopped. Izuku disappeared for 5 full days. 5 days, and Dabi kept telling himself. Maybe he got scared, maybe he got fed up with me, maybe he saw my face clearly and decided I'm a monster, maybe he was avoiding me the whole time. He was sitting in his usual corner, back against the wall, twirling a small knife between his fingers. He tried to convince himself he didn't care, but he broke down every time he opened the room door and found no one waiting for him. I told him not to follow me, maybe he took it seriously. Or maybe he no longer sees any point in coming back. Fu, why do I care? But his heart knew the answer. Because having someone waiting for him for the first time was too precious to lose. After the 6th night, as he lay on the cold floor, someone opened the door. Izuku entered quietly. Not a word. No apology. Just his bag on his shoulder and his notebook in his hand. Dabi looked at him with slight surprise, but he hid it behind a rough voice. You're late. Izuku smiled shyly as he approached. I was a little busy. Busy, explained nothing. But Dabi didn't dare to ask further, afraid of hearing an answer he might not like. Izuku sat on the inner threshold of the door, then opened the notebook. He started writing quickly, muttering to himself, scrutinizing strange notes full of arrows and lines. "What are you doing?" Dabi finally asked. Izuku's green eyes lifted to him, containing something resembling fatigue, something like fear. "I'm trying to calm myself down." "By writing?" "By analyzing." Izuku flipped the notebook toward him. Pages filled with analysis of top heroes' quirks, weaknesses, energy calculations, success probabilities, and counterabilities. Dabi stared at him for a long time, then said in a half-sarcastic, half-amazed tone, "You do this for fun?" Izuku laughed with slight embarrassment. "Not exactly. This helps me stop thinking about bad things." Dabi didn't understand, but he felt it. He felt this young man was hiding something very dark. While flipping through the pages, Izuku suddenly said, "I can analyze your quirk, if that's not intrusive, of course." That was the first time Izuku had asked him for something personal. Dabi felt confused. A desire to accept, and a desire to run, and a voice inside him saying, "Don't give him anything. He'll run away as soon as he knows the truth about you." But another voice, deeper, more fragile, whispered, "Give him something that will make him stay longer, even if it's small." "No, it's not intrusive," he finally said. He lit a small flame in his hand. More than he needed to. As if it were an unconscious desire for Izuku to see him. While he explained to him how it worked, how it consumed his body, and how it burned him from the inside. Izuku was writing, observing, scrutinizing, asking gently, without judgment, without fear, without disgust. When he finished, he said in a quiet voice, "There are ways that might help you, but I don't recommend them until I finish analyzing everything." Dabi nodded, surprised by an interest he didn't think he deserved. Then he suddenly asked, with something like a challenge, "And Endeavor, do you have an analysis of him?" "Yes," Izuku replied without hesitation. Dabi's eyes widened slightly. "Do you like him?" "No, not much," Izuku said simply. "He's violent and aggressive, and he's not on the list of heroes I trust, at least for now." Silence. Silence punctuated by Izuku's scribbles in his notebook and the turning of pages, and perhaps some distant city noises. Then a longer silence. Then the words came out of Dabi's mouth as if they had been locked up for years. "I hate him. I want to destroy Endeavor." Izuku suddenly raised his head. It was the first time he had seen the truth clearly in Dabi's eyes. Anger, pain, a shattered past, and something resembling a hidden tremor. And for a moment, for the first time, Dabi didn't feel alone in this confession. Midoriya took a deep breath, feeling a pang in his heart. It wasn't shock, nor fear, but understanding. Understanding the anger, the pain, and the hatred mixed with disappointment. He looked at Dabi, at those eyes that hadn't hidden their malice yet, but also weren't ready for complete trust. He offered a slight smile, trying to lighten the weight of the words, but he didn't say anything immediately. "That's hard, to carry all that anger inside you alone," he finally said in a calm voice, careful not to show any judgment. Dabi didn't raise his gaze, not wanting any encouragement or cliché words. Izuku sat on the floor near him, a small distance away, not too close, not too far, a safe place. While the League of Villains ignited the flame of anger in Dabi's heart and increased its blaze, Izuku wanted to redirect it, for even raging fires have their use if they burn the right ground. Sometimes, anger is a sign of something else. Something else. Dabi muttered boredly, without much desire to hear the explanation. Yes, sometimes it's a sign of pain, of losing something you loved, or a feeling of being alone. Dabi was silent. Izuku continued while returning to scribbling in his notebook. "It's hard to find someone who understands you, and it's harder to trust them. But you know, sometimes just expressing it, just having your voice heard, can be the beginning of something else." Dabi looked at Izuku's notebook, at the pages full of analyses, then at the young man himself, and felt something new. Curiosity, a strange connection, and unexpected safety. He wasn't happy talking about his feelings, but he felt for the first time that someone could be by his side without letting him fall. Izuku didn't push. He didn't ask about the past, didn't try to know everything. Instead, he sat, writing, erasing, sometimes smiling, sometimes whispering. Just take your time. I'm here. And even though his body was still tired, his mind occupied, and his soul burdened, Izuku felt something small growing inside him. A desire to protect, a desire to free Dabi from his anger, not because of his powers or what he knew, but because he needed to make him see that someone cared. And that moment, in the silence of the abandoned apartment, was the turning point. Dabi didn't reveal more, didn't share his plans, didn't smile, but he felt, for the first time in years, that he had a place, a person, something he could rely on. And while he remained silent, his heart kept wondering, could this young man be different from everyone else? The place was strangely quiet. The light of the late afternoon filtered through a crack in the broken concrete wall, drawing a faint line on the dusty floor. Dabi was lying on the thin mattress, an arm behind his head, his eyes watching the boy sitting near the wall. Izuku was doing nothing but writing as he always did. The pen slid quickly and anxiously across the page, as if emptying a head that was too full. Dabi didn't understand how a boy this age could carry all this preoccupation. He watched Izuku's silence as he wrote, always writing, as if the whole world existed inside that notebook. After a long minute of silence, Izuku said in a low voice, without thinking, "Actually, I think we're similar." Dabi didn't look away, only made an inquisitive hum. What do you mean?" Izuku breathed deeply, staring at the burned scars on his arm. "I said we're similar, you and I." The pen kept moving. Another moment, then Izuku's voice came, calm, direct. "We both want to take someone down." It was as if the words hit an internal switch in Dabi's chest, making him sit up slightly, looking at the boy with an attention he hadn't given anyone in a long time. Izuku continued without lifting his eyes. "And I need Endeavor's power, so, can you postpone destroying him a little?" The air froze between them. Dabi's expression instantly flipped from focus to rage. He sat up fully, his shoulders tense, his eyes sparking with a flame that was almost real. "What?" His voice was sharp. "Do you think I'm just joking?" Izuku's pen didn't tremble. He showed no surprise. "I didn't say that. Dabi interrupted him with a louder voice. "You say it as if it's a simple decision. As if I can press a button and wait a little." Izuku finally closed his notebook and placed it calmly beside him. "I'm not asking you not to do it. Just postpone it." He inhaled. "Endeavor has made many mistakes. He must be held accountable. You don't deny that. But not now." He looked back at his notebook, contemplating whether he should reveal this, flipped a few pages as if searching for something specific, then turned the notebook toward Dabi. "This is just a summary of him. 7 pages. The dedicated notebook for him is at my place." Dabi's eyebrows furrowed. He slowly took the notebook as if it contained something dangerous. He opened the first page, then the second, then the third. The summary was stunning. Endeavor's quirk, the heat of his flame, its maximum limits, the agency's performance, details about his sidekicks, his behavior in combat, his potential weaknesses, and the most important point, the ignored effects of his battles. Everything was written with a precision that raised suspicion and awe. How could this precision be just a summary? Dabi said with a short, sarcastic laugh. "This won't take him down. They'll find an excuse for all of this. Society likes to be deceived." He was about to close the notebook and return it. His eyes suddenly stopped. At the bottom of the last page, one small line, written in lighter ink, perhaps not intended to be noticed. He read it. Then he read it again. Then, the paper crumpled between his fingers as his fist trembled. "Endeavor abuses his family." For a moment he felt he had lost the ability to breathe. He stood half upright, his eyes wide, his voice shaking despite his effort to control it. "How?" He reached his hand towards Izuku, as if he wanted to ensure he wasn't hallucinating. "How do you know this? Where did you get this information?" "No one. not even those closest to him, knew. Before he could reach it, Izuku lightly pulled the notebook away. He looked up at him for the first time since the conversation began. The look was calm, but held something incomprehensible. Confidence? Awareness? Or perhaps knowledge beyond what was appropriate. And at that moment, Dabi felt something strange in his chest. This young man, he wasn't making fun of him. He wasn't minimizing his anger. He wasn't treating him as a passing issue. Instead, he was completely on his side. Silence briefly reigned between them, Dabi standing half upright, and Izuku staring at him with a steady gaze. The air was heavy, and full of what was left unsaid. Dabi clenched his teeth, his hand trembling. "Even if you are on my side," he finally said, his voice low but sharp. He raised his head, and in his eyes was a flame not of his quirk. "I will not wait." This was an undeniable certainty, a certainty he had lived with for years. He had lived it with skin clinging to the bone, with the smells of burns that never left him, and with a hatred deeper than any wound. "I have kept this dead body alive," he gestured to himself with a bitter laugh. "Not because I wanted life. I haven't wanted it for a long time." He took a step forward as if the words were heavier than his feet. "I'm alive only because Endeavor isn't dead yet." Izuku's voice didn't tremble for a moment. "I won't stop you from that." Dabi froze. But Izuku continued, "Not now." Dabi's features grew harder. "You say that easily, as if a few weeks of sitting with you will stop years of the desire to take him down." Izuku shook his head. "I didn't say you will stop. I said, just postpone it." He approached 2 steps, close enough to see the shadows of the old flame in Dabi's eyes. "I will help you." Silence. Then he added, with a clarity that almost stopped Dabi's heart, "And I will ensure your scars disappear." Dabi's eyes widened, not in anger, but in silent, broken astonishment. Izuku continued, "And I promise you, it's not just words. I'm not a doctor, but I know what can be done. I know how we can restore your skin, how we can fix the damage, and how we can modify your body to suit your quirk without it tearing you apart." He raised the other file in his hand. "But I need Endeavor's power." Dabi's fingers gripped the air as if he wanted to strangle someone. "I need him as an access point, not a target." Then he said slowly, as if laying out the terms of a dangerous deal. "Wait for me. Don't become a villain. Don't commit a crime yet." Then, in a lower, more serious tone, "Let me help you, let us take Endeavor down, at the right time." The words were enough to detonate a volcano inside Dabi. The first rejection came quickly, instinctively. "No." He said it harshly. He turned his back, as if his rejection was self-protection. But something in Izuku's offer, something in the idea of removing the scars, made his feet freeze. It wasn't simple. It wasn't just temptation. Instead, it was something he hadn't allowed himself to even think about before. He allowed his face, the face whose original features he no longer knew, to turn slightly toward the young man. It wasn't just cosmetic. It was a restoration of something of himself. Something he lost before he knew what it meant to lose something. The idea of moving without feeling his skin crack. To talk without pain. To feel his blood without its burning scent. To regain a form he could look at without contempt. It suddenly colored his imagination, with terrifying force. He clenched his teeth. He said in a low, almost inaudible voice, "You will guarantee that?" Izuku didn't hesitate. "Yes." Their eyes met, one looking for a place to shelter, the other extinguishing a fire similar to his own. And both found something in the other they weren't ready to admit. Dabi closed his eyes for a moment. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to scream. He wanted to kill Endeavor now. To live without pain? Without being burned? Without endlessly decaying dead skin? That was bigger than his hatred. Or perhaps it was an extension of it. And between rejection and desire, something collapsed inside him, and he said in a husky voice, "I hate you for making this tempting." But his hands dropped away from his chest, and his eyes no longer carried the same insistence on leaving. That was close to his consent. Izuku was still holding the notebook, his fingers trembling over the torn edges of the page, but his gaze didn't leave Dabi. "Does your quirk have anything to do with healing?" Dabi asked the question with hesitation, as if revealing something he didn't want to. But Izuku shook his head immediately. "No," he answered without explanation. And Dabi for the first time in his life didn't ask again. Perhaps because he feared hearing an answer he wouldn't like, or an answer that would reveal his hope was just a mirage. Izuku took a deep breath, the coldness returning to his tone. "But if I promise, I will deliver. Don't doubt me." Dabi looked at him, half convinced, half terrified of the conviction. Then Izuku said in a low voice, "I will disappear for a long time. About 2 months." A short gasp escaped Dabi, unintended. "Don't look for me." He handed him a folded piece of paper. An address. A specific time. A few instructions written in quick handwriting. "Those you meet at this place will take care of your treatment." Izuku raised his finger warningly. "But you must be disguised. Don't reveal your identity. Not your name. Not your face." The amount of trust required for Dabi to do that was immense. Perhaps too much to bear. Then Izuku completed. "And there's one more thing. Someone will come to pick you up. Don't worry, he won't hurt you." Izuku took a breath and continued. "He will take you to a safe place, better than where you are now." Dabi remained still, like a stone. Izuku stepped closer and said, "Just promise me one thing." The voice was low, but carried the weight of an entire war behind it. "No crimes. No stealing. No gangs." Dabi raised his head. Thousands of words he couldn't say gathered in that movement. And finally he nodded, even if only slightly. And Izuku smiled, a very small smile. Then he vanished from his life for months. A few days earlier, the city's back alleys seemed to have breathed evil for years, and every neon light shone like a spying eye. Izuku knew the way well. He didn't need maps or a guide. This place, that hidden bar behind an abandoned fish store, its door that opened through specific knocks, its heavy scent that mixed the dampness of old wood with the smell of cigarette smoke. He pushed the door, and its sharp screech was heard. The dim light fell on Jiren, as if he had been waiting for him for an hour. Jiren raised his glass toward him, saying without a smile, "I was sure you'd come tonight." Izuku advanced with measured steps, sat down, and didn't order anything. "Did you get the approval?" Jiren leaned forward, placing his elbow on the table, his voice so low it forced Izuku to listen. "The Hasaikai viewed your request as a risk, then as an opportunity. Their leader, Overhaul, leaves nothing to chance. He asked about you 5 times. Izuku blinked slowly, hiding a small smile. "And what did he say?" "He said treating one person is not a problem, if the price is worth it." Jiren was silent for a second, looked around, then said, "I told them what you told me, about the quirkless, and how this type of information only reaches rare people. They seemed very interested. Yakuza interest is not a simple thing, kid." Izuku leaned back, looking at the lined-up glasses as if listening to familiar music. "I told you, they would agree." "But why?" Jiren asked with slight sharpness. "You're asking for complete biological modification, almost a reconstruction of a body from scratch. This isn't an ordinary request even for Overhaul." Izuku moved his fingers over the wood. Overhaul's quirk relies on disassembly and then reassembly. He understands the body more than most doctors and researchers. For him, modifying a defeated person on the verge of death is not difficult. It's a challenge, and his challenges are precious. Jiren gave a short laugh. "And the price? A quirkless person?" "Not just a person," Izuku whispered, "but a puzzle. Raw material. A project. Something that attracts people like Overhaul, who see humans as pieces that can be disassembled and reassembled." A heavy silence passed between them, as if a wall of shadows separated the table from the outside world. Then Jiren added, "They agreed to treat the person you want on the condition that the person adheres to the appointment they set, be it the address or the timing." Izuku nodded, as if he knew the answer before he heard it. But I don't need more than that. Jiren watched him for a long time, a look of doubt, or perhaps slight fear. You know, you move with the confidence of someone who has lived through these events before. As if you have already seen their endings. I don't like that feeling. Izuku smiled that calm smile that hid thousands of secrets. Confidence is just the result of correct calculations. When he left the bar, the cold air slapped his face, but it didn't wake him from his focus. His head was full of timelines, probabilities, and future branches from which he chose the best. He remembered Compress. His disclosure of his knowledge about the fighting ring, his analysis of the man's quirk. His reaction. He remembered Jiren and the Yakuza. Then he looked at the paper he was preparing to give to Dabi, before he even got his consent. Had he become reckless? Or had the life he lived there, in the future, instilled in him a terrifying certainty? He didn't answer. He just continued walking. He really wouldn't leave things to hope and wishing. If he wanted to achieve what he wanted, he would exert the utmost effort for it, and these small steps were only a path to the big events. The following days passed in a troubled slowness. Inko would wake before sunrise, not because she was used to waking up early, but because worry began to wake her up by itself. She would open her phone first, her eyes searching for a late message from him, or if he had gone out again without telling her. And like every morning, she would find the same short texts. I'm fine. Made it home. Good night. 3 words for at most. Abbreviated, cautious, as if every letter dragged behind it what he didn't want to say. She sometimes heard his footsteps in the hallway at night, quiet but tense steps, as if the person walking wasn't the son she had known all his life, but another version of him, heavier, deeper, and older than his years. On one of those nights, he came home earlier than usual. He opened the door very quietly in uncomfortable silence. Like a soldier returning home after a battle, he didn't quite walk away from intact. She immediately raised her head, a small smile on her lips despite her fatigue. You're back early today. He shrugged slightly without lifting his eyes. There was nothing today. His body was rigid. His arms were closer together than normal, as if he was trying to occupy less space in the world. She approached him slowly. Izuku, have you eaten anything? He hesitated for a moment, then said, Yes, don't worry. But his stomach made that soft sound he couldn't hide. She looked at him. She didn't reproach him, didn't ask, didn't show anything. She just said, I'll fix you something warm. When she offered him the food, he extended his hand hesitantly, as if the simplest touch weighed heavily on him. But he said in a very low voice, Thank you, Mum. That one word was enough for all her weariness to vanish. After finishing only half the dish, he put the spoon aside. I'm sorry for worrying you. She smiled at him, a soft but realistic smile. I'm your mother, Izuku. Worrying is part of the deal, remember? And despite the few words, despite the sadness clinging to his features, he laughed a little. A small, short laugh, but it was the first sincere laugh in days. And in that moment, Inko understood something important. Even if he didn't tell her the truth, even if the past he carried was something she couldn't touch, he was still her son. And she was still able to reach him, even with a small thread of warmth. And so, she would wait with a mother's unending patience. Until the moment he was ready to say everything. Or, until the moment he collapsed and found no sanctuary but her embrace. His mother was arranging the dinner plates when he approached her with cautious steps. He looked at her for a moment, longer than necessary, as if trying to etch her features into his memory before he pulled away from her again. Mom. She turned with a warm smile he hadn't been used to for a while. Yes, sweetheart. He hesitated, placed his hand on the edge of the table, then said in a low voice, Can we watch a movie tonight? Together. She didn't expect that. She blinked, then her smile slowly widened, a smile holding pure joy, and a small joy mixed with subtle relief, because she had felt that her son had grown distant from her in recent weeks. Of course, Izuku. Her tears almost shimmered as she said it, while his heart squeezed in his ribs. He hadn't asked her for something like this since he was younger. For her, a warm moment. But for him, a desperate attempt to gather as many memories as possible before he disappeared for long days, maybe weeks. While she prepared the tea, he turned on the TV without interest. And while flipping through the channels, a live interview appeared. Look, here is today's hero, the hero Midnight, who successfully freed 7 hostages from a shop controlled by a Class B villain. Without any injuries, neither hostages nor civilians, thanks to her famous sleep quirk. Midnight appeared, laughing lightly, confidently greeting the camera. The studio applauded. His mother said with a smile, "My goodness, she's strong. Look how confidently she speaks. You grew up watching her on the news." Izuku smiled. A gentle smile, which slowly turned into a sad one. He knew how it would end. He knew the moment she would die. He knew the date, the hour, and the last scream she let out. He tried to stop himself from thinking, but images of her corpse returned to him like glass shards. He leaned back, staring at the screen, silent. They sat watching a comedy movie. His mother laughed. His voice didn't come out, but he sat close to her, closer than usual. Every time she laughed, he felt pain in his chest. How terrified she'll be when I disappear, how much I'll make her cry. He tried to focus on the movie, but he couldn't. His eyes remained fixed on her hand resting on the blanket. He wished he could hold it, but he was afraid she would notice his tension. And as the movie ended, his mother laughed and said, "We have to watch another one next week." He nodded, but inside, "Next week? I might not be here." That night, sleep refused to approach him. He kept tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling, blinking in slow, heavy movements, until he finally succumbed to drowsiness. And as soon as he closed his eyes, the darkness of his dreams entered. No footsteps, no breath of air, just a creeping black wave, as if the night itself had sneaked into his room. He found himself standing in a long hallway. Very long, his eyes couldn't reach the end of it. Everything was white. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, even the air seemed faint from the intensity of the clarity. The silence was strangely reassuring. He even felt tempted to move, just to step forward, one step. He lifted his foot. But something pulled him. When he lowered his gaze, his chest clenched. A hand, erupting from nowhere, clinging to his ankle, and its color, red, cracked, as if the very flesh was bleeding. He gasped, quickly bending down to try and pull it off, but as soon as he touched it, dozens of hands exploded from the white ground. Twisted hands, long fingers, reddish, claw-like nails. All of them lunged at him at once. They grabbed his arms, his shoulders, his back, his ankles. He struggled, kicked, screamed, but their grips tightened, pulling him towards the ground. And when he closed his eyes for a moment, the whiteness disappeared. He opened them to absolute darkness. No features, no floor, no ceiling. Just darkness alive, breathing near his ears. Then the whispers began. Soft, fragmented. Then they increased, multiplied. They bred upon each other until they turned into collective screams. Screams in voices he knew. Heroes he had known. He had trained in their footsteps. He had wished to join them. And now, he saw them before him. Many corpses, scattered, some lying down, some sitting with hunched backs. And the worst, everyone was looking at him. Distorted faces, eyes wide open to the fullest, staring at him with the weight of accusation. Then, the words appeared without any movement of their lips. "Why didn't you do anything?" They echoed in his head, crashing against the walls of his skull, relentlessly hammering. He reached his hand out to them, but his hand suddenly shrank. It became a child's hand, trembling, as if it didn't belong to his body. The air became thicker, like suffocating smoke entering his lungs and preventing him from breathing. That sound. The sound he wished he wouldn't hear here. The sound he tried to forget every time he fell asleep. Izuku. He froze. He turned slowly. It was his mother. But not as he knew her. Her face was burned, the skin charred, her eyes sunken, and her hair stuck to her skull as if it had melted onto her. She tried to smile, but her mouth cracked from the heat. "Where were you?" Her voice came out broken, mixed with the sound of a distant fire. He stretched his hands out to her, he ran, he screamed, "Mom!" But she didn't get closer. Instead, she moved away. The ground stretched, sliding beneath his feet, moving him farther away with every step he took. The fire consumed the edges of her dress, then her arms, then her neck, and the last thing he saw, her hand reaching out to him, asking for him, crying for help, before dissolving into the flame. "No!" A scream tore from the depths of his belly, and he suddenly woke up, terrified, covered in sweat. The door closed, the room quiet. His chest rose and fell frantically. A dream? No, a nightmare. He curled up, not expecting to sleep again, clinging to his shirt as if he were drowning in a dark sea. His body shook violently. He cried without a sound, only ragged breaths. But the tremor didn't stop. His eyes were vacant, looking at something behind them, something frightening that hadn't yet disappeared from his memory. The white lights hurt his eyes. Students were talking without any break. He had intended to skip class again but couldn't bear to worry his mother more than he already was. The noise was truly painful after a nightmarish night. He turned the page and wrote in cramped handwriting. He raised his head, staring at the teacher. The teacher was explaining a physics law they would learn for the first time this school year. He already knew it. So he disconnected from the world. As he watched the teacher, seeing another scene, the teacher falling to the ground, blood from his nose, his back convulsing, and one of the late heroes saying, "A severe spinal disc herniation." It slowed down his running. The villain caught up to him easily. Izuku blinked, returning to reality. "He will die in 2 years." He wrote in his notebook. Herniated disc, slowed movement, inability to escape. In the front, Bakugo sat, arms crossed, watching him for a while. Deku isn't muttering? Deku had never been this quiet, nor had his eyes ever been so lifeless. There was something scary, something different, heavy, and grim. But Izuku wasn't thinking about Bakugo, nor the child he once was. He was thinking about the night. Today, Dabi's meeting with the Yakuza begins. And I must be ready. It's time to enter Hisakai's base. He looked at his hand. It trembled slightly. The shaking stopped. To save Eri. The night was heavy. Not just darkness, but a suffocating layer of black that wrapped around Dabi's chest, as if the air itself was telling him not to take another step. But he did, because one promise or perhaps one hope outweighed all those voices. If what Izuku said was true, he might get rid of the itching that tore at his skin every night, of his cracked skin, and of the monstrous face that stared back at him in the mirror. And his body might stop reminding him of every mistake he'd made since leaving his family. And if he was a liar, he would be buried here, tonight, inside one of these forgotten warehouses. He stopped in front of the large iron door, reached out his hand, then paused for a moment. Why would he trust a kid? Even if that kid knew things no one should know. He gritted his teeth, pulled his hood lower, adjusted his mask, and then walked in. The light inside was dim, flickering as if it were dying. The smell of rusty metal and dust clung to his tongue. As soon as he took another step, he stifled a chuckle. He wasn't the only masked person here. In the end, he was the last to arrive, despite showing up exactly on time. To his right stood Jiren with his cold smile, which no one knew if it was a threat or just a habit. To the left, a group of Yakuza men, standing with slight tension, their hands resting on their weapons without using them. And a little ahead were 2 men from the 8 Bullets. In the center, his shadow dominated, Overhaul, with his plague mask and hands covered in black gloves. But what truly raised the tension was the vigilante. He stood motionless, back straight, features well hidden beneath the mask, but he didn't resemble any ordinary guard. Something about the way he stood, in that taut stillness, in the green eyes beneath the mask, something familiar. But Dabi didn't pay him much attention. It didn't cross his mind for a moment that this was Izuku himself. The vigilante spoke in a distorted, modified voice. "Who are the one that kid sent?" The way he said, "that kid," as if he was talking about someone else, not himself. About a man he knew, not someone standing here. Dabi nodded, remembering the clear agreement between him and Izuku, no questions. The vigilante shifted his gaze to Jiren, and Jiren shifted a calm look toward Overhaul. As if everyone knew the scenario except Dabi. Overhaul took one step forward, then another, until he was close enough for Dabi to smell the strong antiseptic odor emanating from his clothes. Overhaul extended his hand, and slowly, deliberately, removed his glove. He didn't smile, nor did he explain. He just offered his open hand. Dabi looked around. The Yakuza men stood as if watching a play. The 8 bullets were expressionless. The vigilante fixed his gaze on him without blinking. It's a trap, perhaps, but he had already come this far and wouldn't back down at the last moment. Dabi placed his hand in Overhaul's hand. A moment of silence. Everything exploded. Since his quirk burned his entire body, Dabi had lost the ability to feel pain. His body rarely sent signals of pain. But it was pain unlike human pain. An internal explosion as if his guts burst first, then his bones fragmented, then his skin evaporated. No scream escaped. No breath could be drawn. The entire world turned into a bloodstain. Then darkness. He returned. He returned all at once. A massive gasp tore through his chest. Air rushed in so forcefully it almost choked him. A panic attack violently invaded him. His body trembled, his eyes searching for what had happened, for who had killed him and brought him back to life in mere seconds. But the feeling, the skin. His skin wasn't burning. It wasn't peeling. It wasn't tearing. It was clean. Exhausted, but clean. He couldn't believe it. He didn't dare believe anything. He stood up with difficulty, almost falling. The vigilante spoke with cold cruelty. "Leave now." Dabi turned to him, expecting an explanation, maybe? For him to say something? But the green eyes behind the mask showed no pity. "Our part of the deal is over. Nothing more. No support. No clarification. Just orders," and a sharp look behind which Izuku hid every tremor in his body. And Dabi left. He walked with feigned composure. Every step indicated he was lost, shocked, unaware of what had happened. But he couldn't stay. He couldn't process the moment until he was far away. And when his presence disappeared, the other truth began. The vigilante stepped toward Jiren, handing him a thick folder. Jiren opened it, flipped the pages, nodding, impressed by the accuracy. Then the vigilante turned to Overhaul, who made sure to thoroughly wipe his hand before putting his glove back on. His tone this time wasn't fully disguised, but held an edge of threat. "Don't touch anyone other than the kid, if you want the relationship between us to remain good." No one here knew who was threatening whom. But Overhaul paused for a moment, before reaching for the folder. The vigilante left without waiting for a reply. And Overhaul opened the file. The first page. Izuku Midoriya. Age 3. Quirkless. His picture in the corner, a clearly nervous boy, but smiling a little. Then precise information, his address, his school, the route he usually takes, his interests, his habits, details no one should know except the boy himself. A small smile appeared under Overhaul's mask. It wasn't a smile of satisfaction, but an acknowledgement of the other party's skill. And he said to Jiren as he departed, "If you meet him again, give him an extra bonus in my name." Then he walked out. And the warehouse remained empty. Except 4 fading shadows. Dabi didn't feel his footsteps as he returned to his residence. It was as if he were moving inside a heavy, foggy dream, pressed against his chest. The cold air at dawn stung his lungs, but he barely felt it. All he felt was his body. His body that wasn't burning. His body that wasn't bleeding. His body that didn't look like his. He pushed the door of the residence, and it opened with a dilapidated sound as it always did. Chipud. An annoying squeak. The smell of dampness mixed with burnt smoke. But one thing had changed. He walked into the room, which was barely enough space for him to move, leaving the door open behind him, as if he was unable to return to habitual actions and full awareness. Fortunately, the door closed little by little until it returned to its usual place. Dabi sat on the floor. No, he practically collapsed onto it. His hand rose slowly, trembling, touching his cheek. The skin was smooth. Not swollen, not cracked, not disfigured. All the staples that held it together had fallen off before he arrived. He rushed to the small mirror fixed above the old wooden box. He stopped in front of it. He bent slightly. Then he raised his head. And his face looked back at him. Not the face of the monster he was used to. Not the blue scars, the exposed flesh, or the metal staples. Toya. Or something that resembled him, yet was different. A face pale from exhaustion, but intact. A young man's eyes, not burned. A steady jaw, not falling apart. He almost stepped back as he stared at himself. Is that me? The words came out as a frightened whisper, as if the place wouldn't believe him if he said it louder. He extended his fingers again and touched his cheek, his neck, his arm. He felt its normal temperature, not a searing heat. No stinging inflammation. No skin that flaked off every time he moved a muscle. His breath choked. He didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. He sank to the floor, his back resting against the cold, dirty wall. He tried to breathe, but he couldn't. Not because the pain returned, but because its absence was harsher. How? He imagined Izuku's voice, cold, steady, determined. I can fix you. But the price is heavy. Dabi closed his eyes tightly. Who is Izuku? And why did he give him something no one else had? How did he convince the Yakuza? How did he even dare to do that? What 13-year-old kid does something like this? For whom? And what? And what drove him to choose him out of the whole world? He stood up. He almost moved toward the door. He needed to find the boy. He needed to understand what was happening. He needed to know who this child was, who manipulated fate as if it were a game. But a moment of awareness struck him. He didn't know anything about him. No address. No family. No quirk. No reason. Nothing but his name. Izuku Midoriya. And that's all. He hadn't even bothered to ask. Even his name was given to him without him asking for it. He laughed in a broken, mocking way and bent down to put his hands on his knees. Great. I'm back to life, and I don't even know who brought me back. And before he could decide on anything, a knock on the door. One knock. Very quiet. But it was enough to explode all the tension in his body. He stiffened, reaching for his pocket, for his lighter, for a weapon, for something. But the door opened without permission. A masked man entered, wearing a white mask resembling a theatrical smile, with a short cape and an elegant black coat, moving with a dancer's lightness. Mr. Compress. But Dabi hadn't seen him before. And his smiling appearance wasn't helping. In a flash, Dabi ignited his flames or tried to, but the blaze that used to destroy the ground around him was clearly smaller now. His body was still newly reassembled. The masked man quickly raised his hands, stepping back. Hold on. Take it easy. I didn't come to fight you. His voice was light, sarcastic, theatrical. The short guy sent me. Dabi narrowed his eyes. Short. The masked man laughed. Yes, that guy is short. Even if he tries to look an extra 5 centimeters taller. Dabi was silent for a moment. He realized. Izuku. That short boy. The one who said someone would come to take him. Dabi didn't lower his defenses. But he didn't attack. Compress looked around and immediately placed his hand dramatically on his heart. I can't believe it. Is this your room? Don't tell me he lives with you too. I don't think so. He winked playfully, even though the mask covered it. Dabi resisted the urge to punch him. Compress sighed deeply. Why didn't you pack your things? Are you waiting for me to help you? Dabi raised an eyebrow, trying to understand the man's tone, then looked around. The broken bed, the cheap wooden box, the dirty clothes, the ashes in the corners, the charred walls from his previous fires. Everything looked, miserable, dirty, and stiflingly cramped. He didn't even need to leave. Previously, he couldn't refuse what Izuku said while in shock. He wanted to refuse to go, but Izuku said he wouldn't return. If Dabi didn't go now, when would he meet him? Would he even meet him again? He spoke in a very low voice. I'll pack them now. But Compress waved his hand decisively. Oh no. We don't have time for that. Then he gestured with his hands. Could you step back a little? Dabi took a step back. And with a touch of Compress's quirk, things disappeared one after another. The clothes, the box, the belongings, even the piece of charcoal near the door. They all turned into small, shiny spheres. Compress collected them in a small bag he held in his hand. Let's go, before dawn breaks and we run into the daytime heroes. Believe me, dealing with them before coffee is a disaster. With the transition, the scenes changed. The air changed. The smell. The space. Dabi stopped in front of a traditional Japanese house, spacious and quiet, its wooden walls clean, and its garden neatly arranged. A house that resembled Endeavor's house. But without the pictures of medals, and without his suffocating presence. And this struck Dabi forcefully. This place wasn't his. And he had never dreamed of it. Compress guided him through the wooden hallways until they reached a private room. He opened the door. I'm not sure how long you'll be staying here. That boy acts like I'm a walking bank. It's true I'm wealthy, but I'm not a charity. He gestured with his hand. The kitchen is over there, and the bathroom is on the other side. If you get hungry, cook for yourself. Then he squeezed one of the spheres and opened it, and Dabi's belongings spilled onto the floor, somewhat arranged. He said as he prepared to leave, "You didn't pack them in your old residence, so arrange them here then. This is your first day, so make yourself comfortable." He closed the door behind him, and the room remained silent. Dabi stood in the center, motionless. He looked at the place. The shiny wooden floor, the clean bedding, the wide, uncracked window, the walls free of burns, the fresh air. Was the opposite of everything he had ever known. The opposite of his life. He slowly sat down. Not on the bed, but on the floor, as if he didn't deserve the bed. He stared at his belongings that Compress had scattered there. He stared at his hands. He stared at his life decisions, and how they brought him here. And while he was lost in shock, the door opened slightly, and Compress's head peeked in again. "By the way, we'll be meeting often, and I don't like dealing with strangers in my shows." He bowed slightly. "Call me Compress." "And you?" Dabi replied in a hardened voice. "Dabi." Compress nodded and disappeared. And Dabi remained alone, finally, with his new body, his new room, and his life full of decisions that had strangely returned him to beginnings he never expected. Izuku was not breathing. He was standing among the shadows, among the Yakuza men, beside Jiren, behind the voice-altering mask. But his heart alone was out of control, pounding so hard he felt his chest would convulse, and the mask would fall from his face if he didn't compose himself. Overhaul extended his hand to Dabi. That young man who trusted him. Trusted him, even though Dabi didn't even know him. Izuku swallowed hard, placing his hands behind his back, clenching his fingers until his nails dug into his palms. There was no room to show anything. The vigilante's duty, calm. DSPLN. Not revealing his intentions. But when Overhaul touched Dabi's body, everything exploded. The sound of tearing, the body turning into a splatter of flesh, blood, and ash. Complete disappearance. The silent fall. Then stillness. Izuku felt his entire body shrink. His hand didn't reach out, but he wanted to. He didn't scream, but he nearly did. He didn't move, but he was on the verge of rushing forward. He had promised him, "Don't die, not now, not like this, it's not time." But Overhaul didn't stop. He didn't care about the terror of everyone present. He knelt over the blood stain, collected it with his hand, and rebuilt. The bones returned first. Then the tendons. Then the muscles. Then the skin, the new skin. The skin Dabi had dreamed of without admitting it. Screaming without sound, convulsing, choking on sharp breaths, he returned to life. And Izuku stood frozen. Only his eyes moved, fixated on Dabi, who was regaining consciousness, his gut trembling, as if he wasn't born but fabricated. "Don't go near him. Don't go near him. Don't break him now." His body screamed, his soul rushed forward, but his mind anchored him to the spot. He had planned everything. Dabi was just a step, a small piece in a big game of chess. But seeing him return to life, better than he was, it unsettled his heart in a way he hadn't expected. When he ordered Dabi to leave in a harsh voice, it was to protect him. He was controlling himself so he wouldn't break down first. And only when Dabi had left did he allow one of his breaths to escape. The following night was quiet. Well, quiet for the city, but inside Izuku a storm was raging. He sat on a rooftop, his feet dangling in the air, the wind moving his green hair. He hadn't bothered to wear his hood. Soft footsteps echoed. Then Compress appeared as usual, without invitation, without asking permission, as if appearing behind people was a theatrical hobby of his. So, he pressed his mask to adjust more to the light. Your friend is now living within clean walls. He didn't explode, he didn't run away, and he didn't steal anything. Nice progress. Izuku bowed his head slightly. That's good. He needs time to adjust. Compress put his hands behind his back, pretending to make a formal bow. His condition is stable. Confusing, but he's fine. And if he's not fine, that's none of my business. Izuku interrupted, in a quiet, tired voice. I'll be gone for a while. Don't ask where. Don't look for me. Compress raised an eyebrow behind his mask. Disappearing? Oh, the magic. Let me guess, a new adventure? Another secret? Izuku didn't answer. Inside, he knew what was coming was too dangerous to share with anyone. Compress chuckled slightly. Oh well, take your time. You saved that young man from a room that looked like a grave. And you owe me, so wherever you're going, you have to come back to repay the debt. Izuku was silent for a moment, then nodded. Take care of him. Compress laughed softly, as if the sentence had stirred something strange within him. You think I'm a walking bank, and now a babysitter for your friends too? What an honor. But he didn't refuse. Nor did he consider leaving Dabi alone. His intuition told him something very important. This vigilante is not an ordinary person. And one day, everyone will need him. Then he left, leaving Izuku alone with the city. The weeks crawled by with a heavy, suffocating slowness. The vigilante disappeared. He no longer appeared in the alleyways. He no longer chased criminals. He no longer visited the places he used to patrol at night. He had transformed, once again, into a young student. Appearing ordinary. Appearing utterly insignificant. At school he was avoiding the bullies. Dodging Bakugo. Following the math lesson as if he cared. Wearing the usual smile. Carrying the demeanor of a 13-year-old child. But the truth? He was living under constant surveillance. Not surveillance from heroes, but from people watching on behalf of someone else. Members of the Yakuza. Overhaul followers. Izuku knew they were following him. In fact, he was personally counting his steps to give them their chance. Someone was watching him. 2, perhaps 3. Tracking his movements with precision. Waiting for the moment. It was fine. The plan was moving exactly as it should. Every night, he repeated to himself, I won't break into their base, they will take me to it. Evening descended slowly upon the city. The sky bore a heavy gray hue, as if the clouds themselves were lying in wait. Izuku left school, exhausted. His shoulders slightly slumped, his eyes swollen from lack of sleep, his steps slow and hesitant, as though an invisible weight dragged him from behind. Even breathing felt strenuous. The noise around him was meaningless. The world felt one step ahead of him, a step he couldn't catch. And as he crossed the threshold of the school gate, the voice he had expected came. Deku, where are you going? Izuku turned around very slowly, as if his neck were afraid to move. He saw Bakugo standing there, his fist clenched inside his pocket, a small spark flickering between the fingers of his other hand. 3 students stood behind him, moving with an air of confidence, as if they believed they had the right to block the path. One of them raised his chin mockingly, took a step forward, and said in a slow, taunting tone, You've been too quiet these past few days. Sneaking around like a rat. Izuku didn't reply. His mind was too crowded with things far darker than their words. And in that moment he realized something. He didn't have time for this. Not with the Yakuza preparing to move. Not with them lying in wait. Bakugo narrowed his eyes slightly. then rolled his shoulder as if shrugging off tension. You look pale, Why are you acting like you've seen something terrifying? Izuku did not answer. He didn't raise his head. He stood gripping the straps of his backpack, as if holding onto the remnants of reassurance. All he could think was, not now, not at this time. He inhaled slowly, then said in a faint voice, "Please, get out of the way." One of the boys smiled a cold, sharp smile. He glanced left and right, then let out a short, scornful laugh. Is that the sound of pleading? They weren't going to let him pass. So Izuku suddenly turned his body and darted with surprising speed toward the back road. His backpack jostled against him. The air rushed across his face. Behind him, loud voices erupted. "Get him! Don't run away, you coward!" One bully lunged forward with a wide leap using his quirk, his body lifting half a meter off the ground as he tried to cut off Izuku's path. But Izuku lowered his center of gravity, bent down sharply, then straightened in one swift motion, tripping the boy to the ground. He didn't stop. The second bully grabbed for his arm. Izuku pivoted sharply, using the boy's momentum against him, and shoved him toward a nearby tree trunk. The third bully seized Izuku's backpack with both hands. The grip tightened. The bag stretched for a second before the straps finally snapped. Papers exploded into the air, swirling like a miserable whirlwind. The bully raised his head to shout, "Stop!" Before he could finish, Izuku's fist struck his jaw in a clean, direct punch. His head snapped back. His teeth clashed together. Silence fell. Everyone stared, frozen. This was something they had never seen before. Bakugo took one step forward, eyes wide, breath rough in his chest. "What the?" But his voice broke off, because something else moved behind them. 3 men, dressed in dark clothing that swallowed their silhouettes. The first stepped forward, a quiet, steady step, as if the ground made room for him. He extended his heavy hand and placed it on Izuku's shoulder with deliberate slowness. The touch was cold, as if his fingers were made of metal. "Playtime is over," he said, emotionless. The bullies spun around in fear. One staggered backward. Bakugo raised his hand slightly, a small spark intensifying. But when he spoke, his voice trembled. "Who are you?" None of them bothered to look at him. The second man gripped Izuku's arm. The third seized his other shoulder. They pulled him tight, forcing his body to bend. Izuku shouted, "Let me go!" Why choose a moment when he wasn't alone? The second man tightened his grip. Izuku heard a grinding sound in his joint. The third said coldly, "The file matches. This is the target." Then the first man moved. He raised his arm and struck Bakugo with the back of his hand. One blow. Just one. Bakugo flew backward 2 meters. He hit the dirt hard. The breath knocked from his lungs. He raised his head slowly, eyes trembling. Their strength, it's unnatural. The remaining kids fled. None dared stay. Izuku didn't think. He attacked. No one was supposed to get hurt. That wasn't the plan. This wasn't what he wanted. He kicked, punched, twisted, trying to slip out of their grasp. He kicked one in the knee, punched another in the throat, bit the third's hand to break free. He moved with sharp expertise, as if his mind remembered something his body had forgotten. One man screamed, but their hold didn't loosen. It tightened. One grabbed his feet. Another twisted his arms behind his back until a painful crack sounded. The third pressed his jaw to silence him. "Calm down. We have business." Izuku felt his body crushed to the ground, air escaping his lungs, strong fingers pressing against his face, his head driven into the dirt. He just had to stop resisting. Wasn't this what he wanted? To be dragged to their base? To destroy them from the inside? So why was he fighting now? He heard Bakugo screaming his name from afar, but Izuku had already given up. Everything blurred, then dimmed, then vanished. The wind became distant. The shadows swallowed everything. The last thing he felt was a medical mask forced over his mouth, a sharp chemical scent flooding his nose. Darkness. The air in the police station was suffocating, a mixture of old paper, faint dampness, and an invisible anxiety that filled the room. Katsuki Bakugo sat in one of the hard plastic chairs bolted together, his back more hunched than usual, his hands clasped, tiny, unconscious sparks crackling from his fingers. It was as if he were trying in vain to stop the tremor running through his body. He had some minor injuries that had already been treated. A small bandage sat beneath his eye, which he paid no mind to. Everything around him seemed silent. Even the rustle of the officer's movements. Even the sounds of the phones. But the silence was suddenly shattered. "Katsuki!" He snapped his head up quickly. He froze. His mother, her blonde hair disheveled, was standing at the hall door, worry violently etched into her features. Behind her stood his father, quieter, but pressing a hand to her shoulder, trying to calm her. And next to her, Izuku's mother, Inko Midoriya. Her face was sickly pale. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from something much heavier, a mother's terror for her only son. She didn't wait to be invited. She didn't wait for permission. She walked straight over and collapsed onto the chair in front of Bakugo, as if she had run until she broke. She raised her head, her voice dripping with dread. "Katsuki, is what I heard true?" He didn't answer. She stared at him, her hands trembling as she clasped them tightly together. Please tell me, what happened? Where is Izuku?" Bakugo's face hardened into stone. His eyes widened, but he couldn't face her. He turned to the side, looking at the floor as if searching for lost words there. Inko leaned closer. "Katsuki, please, tell me my son is okay." But there was no reply. Bakugo clenched his fist so hard a tiny spark erupted. Then he whispered in a choked voice no one ever expected to hear from him. "I'm sorry." The word fell like a rock dropped from a great height. Inko froze, one moment in which the world began and ended for her. Then her tears burst out suddenly, with a violence unlike normal crying. With a raw, ear-shattering sob. She buried her face in her hands and wailed sharply. My son, why?" She was collapsing in front of him, slowly falling apart. Bakugo's father rushed to steady her, while his mother placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to soothe her. As for Bakugo, he remained rigid, staring at the ground. His eyes reddened, but he blinked rapidly as if refusing to acknowledge it. He didn't move to help her. He didn't even raise his head, as if he knew he had no right to. The days that followed did not pass well. The police station was no longer just a building. It became a tomb of waiting. Inko Midoriya came daily. Sometimes twice. She stood in front of the desk of the officer assigned to the case, a burly man with cold eyes, who seemed to be performing a routine duty rather than searching for a missing child. Every time she would ask, "Have you found anything? Cameras? Witnesses? Any trace?" And he would always reply, without raising his head, "We are handling the matter. We will let you know if there is anything new." The same words, the same tone, the same indifference. And his gaze never lacked that underlying thought. A quirkless child, maybe he ran away. Maybe he wandered off. He's not important. And that ignited something dark in her heart. During one visit, she finally exploded. "He's my son. Do you understand that? It doesn't matter if he has a quirk or not. He's human. He's my only son." But the officer merely said, "Ms. Midoriya, we are working on it." Then he returned to the papers in front of him, as if her scream had gone unheard. She left the office, broken, clutching the hallway wall for support. And when she sat down on the chair, her hands would rest on her stomach. The place Izuku once was, as if searching for his trace there. And Bakugo? Bakugo came too. Not with his parents. Nor with her. He came alone. He sat in the corner, staring at the floor, listening to Inko's crying from behind the door every day, and feeling something strange, something painful, something burning, coiling in his chest every time he heard her speak his name. And he didn't know how to atone for it. Worse yet, he thought he didn't deserve to atone at all. Inko was standing in front of the assigned officer's desk, her voice low but broken. "Please, my son never lies to me. He didn't run away, someone took him. The officer didn't look up from his papers. He didn't change his tone, as if the matter wasn't even worth the effort of turning around. Ms. Midoriya, we are working. Just like every day. When we find something, we will inform you. The sentence was copied from a canned response. Cold. Lifeless. Inko's hand trembled as she gripped her bag tightly, her lips quivering. But she bowed slightly and walked out. And suddenly, something exploded inside Bakugo. He stood up. He lunged toward the officer's desk. The sound of his footsteps hitting the floor like small shell blasts. What are you even doing? He roared so loudly the glass in the office windows vibrated. The officer looked at him in surprise. Sparks flew uncontrollably around Bakugo's fists, and the eyes that usually showed nothing but arrogance were now boiling with guilt and fury. Days have passed. Days. And nothing is happening. You haven't reviewed a single camera. You haven't questioned a single witness. The officer raised an eyebrow. We operate according to procedure. Procedure? Bakugo slammed his fist on the desk, a massive spark erupting from it, making the light above them flicker. You would care if it were the son of someone with rank, huh? If he had a quirk, this room would be full of detectives, and they wouldn't have assigned it to you. The insults, the truth, the cruelty, all rushed out at once. The officer's face flushed with anger. Watch your language. We don't discriminate between. But Bakugo cut him off, his voice slightly breaking. You're lying so easily, because he's just a quirkless kid, not important, right? Silence suffocated the room. Footsteps. Quiet. Steady. A sound most of the officers knew. Detective Tsukachi. A file tucked under his arm, his face weary after a long day. He was passing by. But Bakugo's voice raw, trembling made him slow his pace. He looked at the scene, and saw Inko standing behind Bakugo, struggling to swallow her tears. He recognized her, she came constantly. But he had assumed, as always, that she was like the parents who broke down easily in cases of runaway teenagers. But this was different. With every word Bakugo spoke, Tsukachi's quirk activated, telling him the boy was telling the truth. And this he could not ignore. He approached with steady steps and said, in a polite yet sharp tone, "What's the problem here?" The officer straightened immediately. "Nothing, sir. The boy is a little agitated. We are working on the case, but..." And then the sound came. A sound only Tsukachi could hear. A faint buzz in his ear. A short alert. Like a vibration. He was lying. Tsukachi's expression changed instantly. The look in his eyes became heavy, like a cell door slamming shut. "You're lying." One word dropped. But it was enough to kill everything in the room. The officer stammered. "Sir?" Tsukachi took a step toward him, as if enveloping him in a shadow twice his size. "I said, you're lying." The officer swallowed, sweat glistening on his forehead. "You haven't adequately progressed the case. You haven't taken it seriously. And that is a mistake I will not overlook." He glanced toward Bakugo and then Inko. His eyes held something no one had seen from him in a while. Genuine anger. "Give me the case file." The officer hesitated. "Yes, sir. This is a divisional decision." "Give me the file." His voice was like a knife scraping against stone. The officer handed over the file with a trembling hand. Tsukachi snatched it, closed it tightly in his grip, and said, "Effective immediately, the case is transferred to my office. I will take over the investigation." Then he turned to Bakugo and Inko. "I apologize for our negligence," he bowed, then continued, "This case will receive its due attention, and I will ensure you are informed of any progress." Inko covered her mouth, as if air had reached her lungs for the first time in days. As for Bakugo, he didn't know what to feel. His anger hadn't subsided, but something inside him, something small, shifted. Perhaps. Tsukachi gave the negligent officer one last look. "And later, you and I will discuss the meaning of neglecting a child's life." He then walked away, heading to his office, ready for the extra work this case would add to his plate. And here, for the first time, The real investigation began. Tsukachi slapped his hand on the table with a force that made the files tremble, the papers lifting slightly before settling back down slowly. The sound of the impact filled the large office. The section chief sharply lifted his head. The officer previously in charge of the Izuku case stood before them rigid, frowning, trying to muster his courage, and failing completely. Tsukachi yelled, his raw anger cutting through the air. "Are you serious? Do you realize what you've done? A child kidnapping case, a child, and yet you neglect the witnesses?" The officer opened his mouth to reply, but Tsukachi slammed the table again. 5 witnesses. And all of them said they saw a child being cornered by several men. And you didn't take a statement from a single one. The officer stammered. It wasn't clear, and maybe. The final witness, Katsuki Bakugo, said Izuku Midoriya was violently subdued and taken against his will, and you say it wasn't clear? Tsukachi glared at him with the intensity of a man accustomed to watching lies bloom like red embers in people's eyes. It was so clear that you didn't even need to say it aloud. The child is quirkless, so you ignored him. Silence fell like a stone. The officer stepped back, his face paling. The section chief shifted his gaze between them before directing his deep voice at the officer. "Is this true?" The officer stammered again. But Tsukachi cut him off, this time with a low voice far more terrifying than his shout. "You are going to close the case as a teenage runaway, without a field investigation, without checking cameras, without any protocol. You nearly buried a child alive." The section chief raised his hand and stood. His tone was severe. "Final. Prepare for your sanctions. The case is withdrawn from you. You will be subject to an internal investigation. You may lose your rank, or worse." The officer froze, opening his mouth to object, but no sound came out. "Get out. Now." And he left, heavy steps, head bowed, as if walking toward a verdict already pronounced. Tsukachi remained standing, his hand resting on the table, struggling to control his breathing. The section chief looked at him for a long moment, then sighed. "Do what is necessary. This case is your responsibility now." Detective Tsukachi's office was bathed in warm yellow light, though it did little to hide the intimidation of the red threads stretched across the massive whiteboard. Tsukachi leaned forward, studying the connections. He reviewed everything he had gathered so far. Photos. Izuku-ui school hallway, alleyway, unknown individuals. Carefully written notes. Circles around small details. Arrows. Question marks. Then a light knock on the door. "Come in." The door opened. Aizawa stood there, hair messier than usual, eyes half closed, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He entered without waiting, set a cup before his friend, and looked around. Serious case, apparently. Tsukachi turned toward him, murmured a faint thank you, and returned to the board. "It was someone else's case, but it came to me after some problems." Aizawa raised an eyebrow. "What kind of problems?" Tsukachi sighed a long, disgusted sigh. "Discrimination. The victim is quirkless." Aizawa's expression darkened instantly. He took a sip of coffee. "And the vigilante case? The one you nicknamed the sniper? Any further contact? Problems?" Tsukachi shook his head. "No. He disappeared a while ago. Maybe he'll finally leave me alone. He seems tired of playing the anonymous vigilante." The pause. "I'm still curious how he got my personal number, though." Aizawa exhaled slowly, thinking aloud. If what the streets are saying is true, he's turned the underworld upside down. Enough that the Hero Commission is considering sending a pro-hero after him. The corner of Tsukachi's mouth lifted, a half-sarcastic smile full of knowing. Aizawa gave him a sharp look. What do you know?" Tsukachi replied simply. "I received leaked papers about the hero they're planning to assign." Aizawa straightened abruptly. "Who?" For the first time in hours, Tsukachi laughed. "Short but real." He pointed at the cup in Aizawa's hand. "A sleep-deprived hero currently drinking coffee in my office." Aizawa stared, frozen for several seconds. "No. Absolutely not. I'm not chasing killers and criminals right now." Tsukachi. "It's practically issued. Congratulations on the mission. Eraser head. Aizawa groaned in annoyance. The silence that followed was enough to show that this was the start of a new hell for them both. Returning to consciousness felt like climbing out of cold water, slow, heavy. Layers of fog lifted from his eyes until he realized he was lying on an unfamiliar bed. He opened his eyes fully. A uniform gray ceiling. No decorations. No warmth. The walls matched stark, dull, intentionally coordinated. He sat up slowly, his limbs heavy, not painful, just stiff from unconsciousness. He surveyed the room. It was gray, but not a cell. A meticulously made bed, a simple but clean wooden desk, and shelves filled with books arranged by color and size. He approached them, fingers trembling slightly, reading the titles. Books about heroes, scientific texts, volumes on the origins of heroes and villains, all subjects he loved. A chill ran down his spine. Something was wrong, something deliberate. At the corner of the desk, he noticed a set of notebooks arranged neatly, too respectfully, as if the person who placed them tried not to alarm him even though they had kidnapped him. He picked up one. But what truly disturbed him was seeing his green notebook, the one where he wrote his notes on quirks. Someone had smoothed out the bent pages. This worried him more than anything. He found other notebooks belonging to him. Ones he was certain he had hidden, especially the sensitive ones. A wave of relief hit him. Evidently, they hadn't found those. Still, he checked every notebook. He picked up Hero Analysis 11, an old one filled with childish, early attempts at analysis. This notebook had been at his house. He hadn't taken it to school. And even if he had, it would have fallen out when the bullies chased him. Bullies. Flesh. Kaken being thrown away from him. Kaken shouting his name, before everything went dark. His stomach twisted. He had put his mother and Kaken in more danger than ever in this timeline, and he hadn't even intervened in the most dangerous events yet. If he intervenes, will he make things worse? His mind spiraled into questioning his right to stay by their side. He forced himself to refocus, shaking off the panic. He examined the room again. He mumbled to himself, voice faint, convincingly confused. Where am I? A faint cold light above filled the room with half-shadows, making everything feel even more desolate. He walked toward the door. An iron door, maybe electric. No handle. Likely opened by a code or a card. Not advanced enough for fingerprints or voice. He wasn't given time to breathe before the door opened. Overhaul stood there, perfect posture, plague mask, one hand behind his back, staring with cold, steady eyes. His voice was calm, emotionless. You're awake. Good timing. Izuku stepped back, shoulders trembling. He raised his hand stiffly. What's happening? Where am I? What do you want from me? Overhaul entered without permission, gaze sweeping the room like inspecting finished work. He stopped near the shelves, fingers hovering over the books without touching them. This room has been prepared for you. He turned, analyzing Izuku like a specimen. We reviewed your interest in scientific books, analysis, heroes. We thought a comfortable environment might make things easier. Izuku swallowed hard. Why me? I didn't do anything. Overhaul didn't step closer, nor try to reassure him. His tone was that of a medical examiner. You are here because I need you. That is the simple, direct reason. The pause. Consider this place your new residence. Izuku's eyes widened. Your residence? What does that mean? Overhaul stepped forward just one step, enough for Izuku to feel the cold threat radiating from him. It means your stay is not temporary. Your role in what comes next is important. You will understand soon. Izuku tried to appear frightened and espèce, but his mind raced wildly. Do they know? Did they see something in my notebooks? He let his voice crack. Please, take me home. I won't tell anyone. I swear. Overhaul ignored the plea. You will find a private bathroom, a desk, and blank notebooks. You may write as you wish. The file stated you have an obsession with quirk analysis, and your notebooks confirm it. Then he looked directly at him. Use your time well. We will meet later to continue our conversation. He turned to leave. But before closing the door he added, and dismiss any expectation of leaving or escaping. Since I chose to bring you here, you will adhere to your new lifestyle. The door closed, and Izuku understood, with terrifying clarity, that this calm was only the beginning of a cage far larger than it appeared. The moment the door closed, the echo of Overhaul's final footsteps lingered in the air like a seal placed upon an inescapable fate. Izuku stood still for a few seconds, staring into the gray void that had suddenly sunk into a heavy silence. Then he slowly let out a breath, a long, quiet sigh. A sigh not of fear, but of awakening. He walked toward the bed and sat on it, testing its firmness as if to confirm that he was indeed here, in this colorless, odorless place where everything was organized to an excessive degree, telling him that every movement within it was calculated. He lowered his gaze, laced his fingers together, and began muttering in a low voice. He planned this, everything. Preparing the room, arranging my notebooks, even the books. He relied entirely on the information I wrote in the file. He raised his eyes to the shelves. It wasn't kindness or an attempt to reassure him. It was calculated behavior designed to create an environment that dominates the mind before the body. He continued whispering, "All right, as long as I'm going to be here for a while, I must start." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped beneath his nose. His eyes sharpened too sharp for a 13-year-old. Memorize the corridors first, every corner, every door, every sound. I know the general layout of this place. Chisaki Kai's underground lair, but it's complex, multi-leveled. He looked around the room. No clock, no sign of day or night. But if he calculated the travel time from Yuzudafu to Hosu and added the time he was unconscious, he had been kidnapped after school, in the evening. Perhaps a whole night had already passed. Then came Overhaul's visit. Overhaul was a busy man. He wouldn't visit after midnight. So Izuku assumed the visit happened during the day. He didn't expect to know the exact hour, but he hoped his estimate was right. A probability, not a certainty. But it was all he had. He stood and walked toward the second door in the room, not the iron one, but the door with frosted glass. He expected what was behind it, and indeed, when he opened it, it was an equipped bathroom. Chisaki was known for his germophobia, so Izuku had expected every room in this base to have a bathroom even before coming here. He'd even bet on having one in his cell if the kidnapping succeeded. He hadn't expected a furnished room instead of a cell. He stepped inside. It wasn't any different from a normal bathroom, but Izuku was not in a normal situation. Anything here could become a tool, a weapon, or a lifeline. So the search began. Even after he left and closed the bathroom door, no sound was heard. Even the door chose silence, while the only living presence in the room sank into thought, his mind filling with potential scenarios and every possible piece of information a small room could offer. He smiled despite everything. The bathroom didn't have many items, but every simple object was enough for him to invent dozens of ways to use it. What could a 13-year-old do with hair wash? Even if he used it as a distraction, he wouldn't resist for. Maybe that's what they thought. Yes, his body was weak and he was small. He'd be knocked down with the first resistance. That is, if he were the child they believed him to be. But he wasn't. He was a time traveler who had already lived a war and nearly ended it. No one would expect that. He sat again, this time on the floor, pressing his fist against his knee. I have to gather evidence, everything I can reach. And I have to be ready for any variable, any unexpected movement. He paused. Then he clenched his fist tighter when a single word echoed in his mind. And Eri. Just saying her name softened something inside him, as if a hard layer cracked for a moment. Her last image flashed in his mind, her small, trembling smile, trying to show courage while pain drowned her eyes. He lowered his head, closed his eyes, and felt a sharp ache in his chest. I can't wait any longer. I can't allow this hell to continue for her. He opened his eyes sharply, glancing at the gray walls. This room, whatever it contains, is still a prison. I can't imagine her living here. At least in this timeline, he would get her out before her trauma reached the point of no return. He wondered, what would Eri be like if she left now? If she escaped long before he and Mirio found her in his original timeline, before she endured things she never dared to tell them, though her nightmares did. That thought only strengthened his resolve. Time passed, he couldn't determine how long. The same gray light remained unchanged, as if the room existed outside of time. He memorized the floor pattern, the number of tiles, and the sound of air passing through the vent. The sound of the automatic lock. He froze. Preparing. The door opened. It was an overhaul. It was another Yakuza member, expressionless, barely sparing Izuku a glance. Coldly he said, "Follow me." Izuku stood slowly, making his steps slightly hesitant part of his crafted role. He walked behind the man through a long corridor, dimly lit, its walls bare. Despite his slow pace, Izuku counted doors, measured distances, memorized every turn. After several minutes, the man stopped by a heavy metal door. He opened it with a card. He pushed Izuku lightly and said, "Inside." Izuku entered. The room was spacious and cold, its walls lined with surveillance devices and metal drawers. In the center stood a chair with leather straps and, beside it, a long table where medical tools were neatly arranged. And next to it, overhaul. He wore medical gloves instead of his black ones, a mask covering his face, eyes focused on the tools as if they were pieces of a puzzle he needed to assemble with surgical precision. When he heard the door, he turned. "Oh, Izuku. You came." He spoke as if welcoming a guest, not a prisoner. Izuku stepped forward, his hand clenching, and before he realized it, a look of silent defiance formed in his eyes. No fear, no collapse, just quiet resistance. Overhaul stopped completely, as if something in that look struck him. He tilted his head slightly. Interesting." He looked directly into Izuku's eyes. "You truly are different." The guard pushed Izuku in and closed the door. The lock's echo rang like an alarm in Izuku's mind. He knew what was next. And he knew the real game had begun, even if knowing didn't prepare him for it. Overhaul wasn't alone. Izuku had noticed that already. Several people worked around the lab, one at a microscope, another mixing solutions. None of them looked at Izuku, as if the arrival of another stranger was routine. And among them, a face he recognized. Kronos. White hair. A calm colder than the room. His posture rigid, statue-like, positioned in front of the chair, waiting for orders, ready to execute. One look made Izuku's stomach tighten. How many people had come here before him? How many had left? How many never did? He clenched his fist. He would not allow Eri to stay here. And he would make sure he was the last, no one after him. It took only 1 second for Overhaul to notice the change. His expression was calm, but that small hesitation revealed much. Something in Izuku's stance, in his steady gaze, in his controlled silence, tightened the air. Overhaul turned fully toward him. His men didn't react, but this moment mattered to Overhaul. He took a step forward. The sound of his shoe against metal echoed sharply. He spoke in a low, cold voice, edged with curiosity like a scalpel. "You look like you're not afraid." Izuku didn't answer. Didn't move. His eyes studied Overhaul, layer by layer, his face giving nothing away. Overhaul narrowed his eyes. He prided himself on reading people. But this child offered something unfamiliar. He moved closer, until only a meter separated them. He raised a gloved hand, touched the edge of his mask, then said clearly, "Fear." He tilted his head. "That's what I should be seeing." Then added, "But I see something else, something I can't define." Izuku lifted his gaze slightly, a movement carrying far more meaning than it should. Not challenge awareness. Overhaul's voice fell to a whisper. "Tell me, what exactly are you?" He stepped closer. Izuku raised his chin slightly, subtle, precise, a barrier he wouldn't let anyone cross. Overhaul reached for his shoulder. And just before he touched him, Izuku moved. Not backward. Just a slight lean away, so subtle, but Overhaul noticed. His hand froze midair. Tension stretched between them. After 2 seconds, Overhaul murmured, "Instinctively, you avoid touch. Not out of fear, but realization." He lowered his hand. "You know something. Something about my quirk, don't you?" Izuku said nothing. But silence was enough. Overhaul smiled something faint beneath the mask. Good. This makes it fun. He turned back to the table, selecting tools. From now on, I will break this composure you're hiding behind. Izuku's jaw tightened barely. But Overhaul saw it. He leaned in voice low. Let's see how long you can maintain this composure, Izuku. Seconds passed in cold stillness. Overhaul walked to the metal chair and pointed, without looking at Kronos. Strap him in. Kronos moved immediately. Silent steps, as if used to rooms where screams were stifled before they began. He looked at Izuku only once, but it was enough to make Izuku feel exposed. Kronos grabbed his arm. Not violently, but firmly. Resistance was meaningless. He strapped his wrists, then ankles, then stepped back like a shadow. Overhaul picked up a file. Clean, crisp pages. He opened it. Izuku Midoriya. A flip. 13 years old. Another. No quirk related. Genetic activity detected. He raised his eyes. You know, this is rare. Izuku kept his face neutral. Frightened but controlled a performance. Overhaul continued. The quirk factor exists in almost every human. Even the quirkless have atrophied copies, small inactive mutations. He placed the file against Izuku's chest, as if imposing truth on him. But you. He raised a finger half a centimeter from touching him. Your genetic signal is completely missing. This is not natural. Kronos read from a paper. The last patient with an inactive quirk had at least 14.2% residual factor. Overhaul nodded. Correct. He looked at Izuku. But not even 1%. No residual percentage at all. The genetic factor is completely absent. A 13-year-old shouldn't understand this, but Izuku understood too well. They're measuring the quirk factor, the genetic linkage. This is much worse than I thought. Overhaul continued. To understand you, I must know why, despite both your parents having quirks, and after examining your family tree there was no anomaly until you appeared. Is this a mutation? Or? He leaned in, eyes sharp. Or are you something else entirely? Izuku had to answer. Carefully. He said, voice trembling calculated fear. I'm not different. I just was born quirkless. A reply meant to sound childish, unaware of the significance. Kronos stayed silent. Overhaul, however, let out a faint, cold laugh. Oh no, don't lie. He gestured. Bring me the previous report. Kronos handed him a small paper. Overhaul held it near Izuku's face. Do you know who was here before you? Izuku didn't answer. An elderly woman. Quirkless. But at least she had a 4% factor declined because she was from an older generation. He folded the paper slowly and met Izuku's eyes. That woman didn't survive. Izuku's breath hitched a real reaction. Overhaul caught it instantly. There it is. The fear. I found it at last. He straightened and picked up tools. A scalpel. An empty syringe. A dropper. And a test tube labeled with long chemical names. He said while arranging them one after the other. I need more blood samples, tissue, and perhaps some fluid from the spinal cord. To understand where your quirk factor disappeared to. Izuku's hand pressed hard against the chair grip. Not terror, but suppressed anger. But he hid that beneath a mask of natural fear. Overhaul approached, raised the needle and murmured. We will proceed step by step, don't worry. I won't kill you. He turned to him again. Not before I know what you are. Then he asked quietly, Kronos, hold his right arm. Kronos approached in silence. He placed his hand on Izuku's arm, not with force, but with a firmness that killed any thought of resistance. His grip on Izuku's wrist was cold, precise, unhesitating. Overhaul said in a voice like a doctor recording a note. I need fresh samples. Muscular and neural. Izuku's eyes widened. Those words meant a deep extraction. Pain no anesthetic could cover. He tried to pull his arm back. Not a refusal, just instinct. Overhaul paused. He met his gaze and said with a chilling clarity, Don't move. You won't like what I'll do if you do. Izuku froze. Overhaul took off one glove and placed his bare fingers over the muscle where it met the nerve. A few seconds. And suddenly, the pain exploded. He didn't use a scalpel. He used his quirk directly. A whole patch of Izuku's arm vanished, leaving behind a void. An exposed, unnatural emptiness. A scream tore out of him before he could stop it. He tried to stifle it, but it ripped his throat anyway. It was his first scream, breaking the room's dead silence. No one reacted. To them it was routine. But Izuku, no matter the memories he carried, no matter the hell he'd survived, nothing could have prepared him for this. He couldn't stop screaming. It felt like the only way to survive the pain. Hold on. The voice inside him exploded his resolve, his goals, forcing him to gasp, regulate his breathing, and cling to control. Sweat dripped from his forehead, sticking his hair to his face. His body burned from the sudden shock of agony. Overhaul, unfazed, took forceps and reached inside the open part, retrieving the sample he wanted. A warm, red piece, blood sliding between his gloves, nerve attached to muscle. He raised it to the light, curious. Your nervous reaction is strong. Good, this means you won't lose sensation easily. He spoke not to Izuku, but about him, as if he were nothing but spare parts. Izuku tried to steady his breathing. The pain seared directly into his brain. His vision flickered, but he held on so he wouldn't look weak. Not in front of him. Overhaul placed the sample aside and took notes. Then he grabbed Izuku's arm again. He signaled Kronos to step away. Don't move. He raised his hand. The air trembled. And with a single touch, he reassembled the arm. The flesh returned. The nerves reconnected. The skin closed. But the sensations rushed back wrong. Tingling, burning electric shocks. His brain refused to believe the tissue was his. His body trembled despite all his efforts. Overhaul observed, "My quirk is precise, but human bodies are less perfect." He leaned closer, whispering, "If I want to keep you functional, you must remember that you belong to this place. Your place is here. Understood?" Izuku didn't reply. He didn't trust his voice. He just breathed slow, bitter. Overhaul waited 5 long seconds. "I want you to remain reparable, not disposable." He replaced his gloves, then chose another tool. Inside Izuku's mind, an alarm went off. If they take deep samples, if that information spreads, someone might discover the quirk factor changes after I get one for all. They'll know something unnatural happened to me. I must evade, delay, obstruct. He inhaled sharply. It looked like fear, but it was focus. Calm down. Any mistake ruins everything. Be patient. Let them think they're in control. Later, you erase everything. Be patient. Just be patient. He drifted for a second. Voices slipped into his awareness. One of Overhaul's followers said, "Blood does not give us an accurate result." Overhaul asked him coldly, "And why is that?" The subordinate replied, "His problem isn't hematological. It's neural." Overhaul raised an eyebrow. Kronos checked the paper. Yes. Preliminary reports indicate an anomaly in brain waves. Overhaul snapped toward Kronos. "Why didn't you say this sooner?" Kronos shrugged. "It was marginal." Overhaul looked back at Izuku, re-evaluating him entirely. "So, we begin with it. Neurological examination." The room was cold enough that Izuku's breath fogged faintly. White lights glared down on him, reflecting off the restraints. Kronos stood to the left, taking notes, watching every tremor. Overhaul approached, calm, steady. He picked up a small vial. "Izuku." He always used his first name too casually. "I wanted to confirm something simple." Even the blood tests gave no result, but they were more interesting than expected. Izuku clenched his jaw. Overhaul lifted the vial. The liquid inside trembled faintly. "There is no trace of a quirk. No mutation. Not even the genes for predisposition. You are completely pure." He leaned closer. Almost non-human in this era. To him, Izuku was a relic. A body from before quirks. A miracle. Or a puzzle. 80% of humans show a joint mutation indicating quirk development. You don't have it. You belong to the 20%, but even among them, you don't fit. Izuku wished he could shut out the words. Overhaul put the vial aside and picked up a long, metallic needle. We will test your neural response. This will hurt. Without warning, he plunged it into a sensitive spot near the collarbone. Izuku knew this pain. He'd lived it through All Might's training, battles, broken bones. But now his body is fragile. The pain jolted through him like electricity. A gasp escaped him. Kronos immediately wrote something. Overhaul observed. A disproportionate reaction. A quirkless person should show less resistance. Your mind reacts as if this area suffered repeated injuries. Izuku cursed internally. Memories flashed, collarbones breaking again and again. But he still smiled barely because he had disappointed Overhaul by not screaming louder. You haven't had any major accident, have you? Izuku panted. No. I just fell from a high place once. Overhaul frowned. Once? Your body reacts like someone used to chronic injuries. Suddenly, he gripped the shoulder, doubling the pain. Izuku screamed. Terrified, angry, and heartbreakingly sad. Kronos watched him longer than usual. Usually, others would have already started pleading and asking for mercy, but this boy barely cries out. Overhaul leaned closer. This is not the reaction of a quirkless child. It should have been worse. He whispered, You're hiding something, aren't you? Izuku, despite the tears, despite the pain, allowed a tiny, tiny smile. A shadow of defiance. Overhaul froze. Izuku whispered, My body may be weak, but my will is not. Overhaul stepped back, shaken for the first time. Kronos murmured, Overhaul, this boy is not like the ones before him. Overhaul calmed down, but danger glimmered in his eyes. Yes, he never was. Which makes me more curious. He changed gloves again. Rest tonight. We continue tomorrow. He left. The door closed automatically. Kronos unbuckled the restraints. Izuku's shoulder throbbed, his heart raced, eyes heavy. He didn't allow the darkness to engulf him. Chrono helped him sit down, surprised by his mental fortitude, while Izuku continued to stare at the closed door. He stares with an intensity unbecoming of a child his age. He repeated to himself, Be patient. Be patient. You must be patient. The experiments continued. He had almost convinced himself that he had grown used to the routine. A week had already passed. Every memory he collected here included a harsh light glaring down at his eyes, the cold touch of metal against his skin, the feeling of a small prick, then a second, then a third. He did not scream. He did not speak. But his eyes would narrow, and his body would remain tense until the very last moment. No, he would never get used to this. And every time Overhaul finished and put his tools away, he would look at him with a scrutinizing gaze, as if the boy before him were nothing more than an equation he was trying to solve. You'll be back tomorrow. Then he would leave, abandoning Izuku to the echo of his footsteps and the lingering memories of pain. The same sentence after every session. The same monotonous tone. Izuku knew there was something he didn't grasp, something that had piqued Overhaul's interest, which was why he wouldn't stop his experiments. This intense fascination with studying the cells of his body had not faded even after several days, and Izuku did not like this unknown variable. His world had been reduced to a single path. From the room to the lab, and from the lab back to the room. The rotating cast of people who escorted him only added another layer of tension. They did it deliberately: disorientation, psychological pressure, a calculated variety of fear sources. But he is certain that it doesn't really affect him as severely as they expect. He returned to his room after another session. He wrapped his arms around himself, pressing them tightly against his chest, trying to dull the pain. He sat on the bed and stared at the white bandages that had begun to accumulate across his skin. They were silent markers of what Overhaul had done to him, and of what he was prepared to do next. He exhaled deeply. Then he stood. He headed toward the other door, the bathroom door, not the exit, which was locked anyway. He opened it and stepped inside, the sound of running water echoing through the cramped space. He washed his hands thoroughly. Warm water trickled slowly over the swollen skin, easing the pain for just a moment. Not enough, but necessary. He watched the redness in his fingers as he rubbed them carefully, as though the motion itself were part of a routine he couldn't afford to break. He dried his hands, then crouched beneath the sink. It was a movement he knew well. A memorized step in a long plan, one that had begun on his very first day here. He reached toward a gray tile in the lower corner. Its fitting looked secure, indistinguishable from the rest. But it wasn't. Not to him. He moved it with calm expertise. 3 presses in the corner. A gentle pull. The tile slid free with near-perfect silence. And beneath it, what he had been hiding was revealed. A pile of notebooks. Notebooks filled with small, precise, continuous script. No wasted space, no unnecessary words. Every page carried the effort of a full day of observation and analysis. Listening, recalling details meant to be forgotten. Overhaul had told him he should make the most of his time here. And this was exactly what he was doing. He pulled out 2 notebooks, the oldest and the newest. He slid the tile back into place, then moved to the wooden desk. He sat down. He opened the newest notebook quickly and began writing in neat, steady handwriting, despite the slight tremor in his hands. Notes on the quirk he had seen today. The hand of one of the Yakuza members. A gun-like structure. A narrow muzzle. The ability to fire sharp, metallic spikes. He listed the probabilities one by one. The potential attack range. The speed of the projectile launch. The reload time, if any. The muscle groups activated during use. Blind spots during activation. He kept writing. What he saw. What went unseen. He didn't ignore a single detail. When he finished, he closed the current notebook and picked up the other. He flipped slowly through its pages. From the first to the last. Then he stopped to read. The abilities of every person he knew, whether from memory or from these recent days. The quirks of the guards rotating outside his room. An analysis of the corridors he had been led through so far. The number of floors, the exit route, and even the entire building plan were included in the notebook. A precise record of the times he was taken to and from the lab. Notes on Overhaul himself. His tone, his posture, his rare hesitations, his moments of silence. He whispered, barely audible, "I must remember everything, everything without exception." As he turned the pages, he noticed the tremor in his hand. An undeniable weakness. His training before all this had been short, but sharp. But here, confined to this room, stripped of movement, subjected to daily pain. All of it was gradually forcing him back into his old body. He clenched his fist. "I cannot allow this." He snapped the notebook shut and returned to the same tile. He slid the newest notebook back into its hiding place. He had only filled a few pages so far. He closed the tile. As for the other notebook, he kept it. Compared to the others, this contains highly sensitive information, so he walked to the toilet. He tore the notebook into tiny pieces, without system or pattern, nothing that could be reconstructed. He repeated every line, every analysis, every conclusion in his mind, building complete scenarios for how this information could be used. He flushed the scraps down the toilet. Then he turned on the water. This way, no trace would remain. He glanced back at the tile. Before, it had been no different from the others. But now, he deliberately left it slightly misaligned. All that remained beneath it were quirk analysis notebooks. And he had already memorized everything he needed. And now, it was time to move on to the next step. He hadn't met Eri yet, but he knew she was here. In his timeline, she had remained with the Shai Hasaikai for several months after her quirk manifested. He believed she was 5 years old now. At least this time, she hadn't been here long. But she was somewhere in this place, locked away in a room of her own. That knowledge didn't stop him. But it did worry him. If he couldn't locate her, rescuing her would be delayed beyond what he had planned. He returned to his desk, sat down, and bit his lip. The pain in his arms easily overshadowed the sting of blood on his mouth. He couldn't stand the thought of leaving Eri here for even one more second. He couldn't think of a way to see her without knowing where she was. His guards would never allow him to leave the room. And any attempt to wander alone would be caught by the surveillance cameras. Then, he remembered something else. It made him frown. There were no cameras in his room, nor in the bathroom. He had checked many times. The corridors and the lab were saturated with them, but not here. They wanted to give him a false sense of security, so he would lower his guard. But Izuku noticed the inconsistencies. Faint marks on the floor, visible only at certain angles of light. Subtle differences in disinfectant scents despite the fact that he never cleaned the room. Books on the shelves that were periodically disturbed. Izuku always flipped pages from the bottom. Whoever checked them flipped from the top. A detail that wouldn't slip past him. Someone was entering his room in his absence. Searching it. Watching him, without his knowledge. He leaned back in his chair and let out a short, nearly soundless laugh. Overhaul and privacy. Normally, he wouldn't laugh at something like this. But the irony was almost amusing. In a bitter way. He remembered Overhaul's future. His mangled face. His severed hands. His breakdown after experiencing only a fraction of what Eri would endure. His smile froze. For the first time, he didn't feel guilty about wishing for someone's death. Instead, he felt it was less than what deserved. Something was different today. Izuku realized it the moment his door opened. And on the other side, it wasn't one of the Yakuza followers. It was Overhaul himself. This had never happened. Overhaul didn't waste time retrieving him personally. Yet today, he stood there, offering only a small nod. Follow me. That alone was enough to make Izuku's heart race uncomfortably fast. He followed. Quiet footsteps. No words. No explanation. Overhaul didn't even glance back, as if he knew with certainty that Izuku would follow regardless. Izuku's mind, however, refused to slow. Cameras. Doors. A bend in the wall he hadn't seen before. He smiled. A small, unseen smile. This corridor was familiar. Too familiar. The raid corridor. Left would lead to the stairwell and outside. Right to the emergency exit Overhaul would later use to escape with Eri. He found it. At least the escape route was no longer unknown. They passed the usual lab. Overhaul didn't stop. That alone confirmed it. Today was different. Overhaul halted before a wide metal door. Enter. There was no choice. Izuku stepped inside and his heart clenched. Perhaps he had hoped it would be different. It wasn't. Another lab. Larger. More advanced. A wall of equipment. A medical bed surrounded by wires and tubes. Metal tools arranged with terrifying precision. New machines caught his attention. Transparent cylinders. Pressure gauges with rapidly shifting numbers. Surgical instruments gleaming under harsh white light. And Overhaul stood at the center of it all. His gloves were pristine, as if awaiting blood. He looked up, cold, but beneath it, curiosity, exhilaration, anticipation. Today, he said quietly, we'll try something different. He didn't wait. Chronostasis stepped forward. He pressed a hand to Izuku's shoulder, forcing him down onto the bed. That's when Izuku noticed the restraints. Arms. Legs. This experiment wouldn't allow movement. They secured him tightly. Cold metal against skin. Leather straps tightening his chest. Then Overhaul approached. He studied Izuku like a priceless specimen. There's something I don't understand, he said. A void in your cells. Not a quirk. Not the absence of one. A gap. He leaned closer. 80% of humans possess quirk-linked tissue interacting with nerves, blood, neural electricity. He grabbed Izuku's arm, and without warning, he rearranged the bone. A scream tore from Izuku's throat, not just from pain, but from shock so severe the mind refused to accept it. Overhaul immediately restored it. Your cells, he continued calmly, are missing a layer, an anomaly, but one that can be exploited. Chronostasis returned with a metal case. When it was opened, a thick white vapor came out of it, dry ice. Always used to keep vital organs alive. Inside, a pale gray skin graft. Izuku knew immediately. Victims. The victims on whom Overhaul had tested his quirk. He adjusted the graft over Izuku's shoulder, saying coldly, "I'll test how your cells react to a transformation-type quirk. How your immune system will interact with it." If there was one thing Izuku knew about Chisaki and had memorized well, it was that he liked to explain his experiments. He saw them as discoveries worth knowing, worth praising. And that only filled Izuku with disgust. When the skin graft was placed on Izuku's shoulder, it seemed at first normal. Not normal for an ordinary person, but normal compared to what he had already been through here. Then Overhaul reached for Izuku's shoulder and touched his skin. For the first time, Izuku felt a different kind of pain. Not the tearing of flesh, but a sensation as if something was slipping beneath his skin, searching, pressing, digging. A tolerable pain. Overhaul reconfigured the point of contact with surgical precision. Not tearing, but unveiling. Izuku's skin opened without blood. One layer sliding over another. Muscle fibers expanding quietly, in a terrifying silence. Izuku gasped. His fingers clenched. He squeezed his eyes shut and turned his head away, trying to breathe. His chest refused to respond. His mind refused to comprehend. Then everything calmed. The fusion became clean. No blood. No tearing. Just a cold sensation creeping through the skin, then settling. 1 second. Then another. And everything flipped. The first sign was heat. It started at the fusion point. A small warmth. Then larger. A blaze. Izuku felt his shoulder boiling from the inside, as if a silent fire were trying to claw its way out from beneath his skin. His fingers twitched. Then his entire arm. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. And the real pain came. Not the pain of a wound, nor a fracture, but the pain of rejection. He felt the foreign skin move. Not contracting but pulsing. As if it were alive. As if it were trying to escape. At the same time, his original skin pulled inward. Retreating. The two was fleeing. Two skins fighting over the same shoulder. A scream tore out of him without permission. Strange. Distorted. As if it belonged to someone else. With every pulse, white spots burst before his eyes. Then black. Then nothing. The world drifted away. His body followed. He tried to breathe, but he couldn't feel his chest. Couldn't feel his arm. Couldn't feel himself. His consciousness floated above his body, as if an invisible thread had snapped. Was he dying? Would he die like this? Was this one of the deaths he hadn't prepared for? The heat reached a threshold his nerves could not withstand. The foreign skin began tearing involuntarily. His own skin shrank further, as if his entire body were screaming, "Reject! Reject! Reject!" His whole body convulsed. A moment so violent he thought his spine had shattered, that his muscles had torn free from bone, that his heart had stopped. For a fleeting, fragile instant, he hovered between life and death, as if he heard his own voice from far away, as if he saw himself from above the bed. This was the closest he had come to death since returning through time. Everything collapsed inward. The foreign skin retracted violently, as if being ripped away. His own skin swelled red, then blue, then black along the edges. Overhaul shouted for the first time, "That's enough." He didn't wait. His hands snapped forward. Disassemble. Izuku felt something ripped from his soul. The foreign skin vanished. His shoulder returned to its original state slowly, painfully. Overhaul reconfigured it rapidly, his hand trembling for the first time. Izuku collapsed onto the bed like a puppet whose strings had been cut. His breaths came ragged and shallow, as if he were drowning in air itself. Only then did he realize he was still alive. Still breathing. His chest rose and fell desperately, trying to reclaim the air he felt he had lost. His screams faded not because the pain was gone, but because his body was utterly exhausted. As if his muscles had burned, frozen, dissolved, and been rebuilt 3 times in a single minute. Overhaul stood over him, eyes narrowed, observing the minute movements of Izuku's skin as it returned to normal. Chronostasis remained in the back, motionless as a statue, though his gaze flickered toward his leader's face, as if witnessing something he was not meant to see. Moments passed. Then Overhaul turned to the screen displaying the cell rejection results and the quirk compatibility curve. It was far beyond anything they had seen before. He rejects it. He said it as if savoring a discovery. He approached the bed again, gloved fingers brushing Izuku's fever-hot skin. Your body rejects any quirk-linked tissue. Izuku hadn't opened his eyes. He hovered between consciousness and unconsciousness, instinctively suppressing any unnecessary reaction. His breathing was sharp and shallow like someone who had just surfaced from deep water. Overhaul continued, voice quiet, cold, the tone that always preceded dangerous decisions. We've implanted the same tissue in volunteers before. There's always minor rejection. Normal immune response. But you... He tilted his head, studying Izuku's unnaturally calm face. Your body doesn't just reject quirks. It rejects anything that allows a quirk to exist. He smiled. A genuine smile. The smile of scientific revelation. Leaning over the bed, he murmured more to himself than to Izuku. If I could replicate this, we could create an entire generation with naturally quirkless abilities. Children will be born without quirk, and those who possess it will die. Even barely conscious, a chill crawled up Izuku's spine. Understanding dawned instinctive, not logical. His body accepted only one thing. Something he knew well. Something that existed inside him in the future. One for all. He had always felt drawn to it, to its burning embers and overwhelming power. This wasn't coincidence. It was proof. Dangerous proof. If Overhaul learned the truth, everything would end. Izuku's fingers twitched. He finally opened his eyes, a feverish gleam in his wide pupils. Yet he controlled his tone. What does this mean for me? No hint of weakness, only the tone of someone seeking understanding. Overhaul sensed it. He stepped closer, almost touching Izuku's shoulder, but then he pulled back, as was his habit. It means you are a rare case. Unique. The foundation of my research. Slowly he turned away, heading toward the table where he collected the experiment results, gesturing to chronostasis. Izuku didn't understand the signal and didn't try to. Chrono approached, undoing Izuku's restraints, helping him sit up, then moving toward one of the few members in the room. Izuku didn't hear their conversation. The member left shortly after. And because you were obedient today. Overhaul's voice carried a hint of excitement. Izuku turned to him. You have one right to request something. Surprise flashed across Izuku's face. Chronostasis, back at his side, raised an eyebrow. He had never seen the boss grant such a privilege to any subject before. Izuku didn't reply immediately. His head felt heavy, his body burned from within, his heart pounded as if trying to escape its cage, struggling to regain control. Even sitting exhausted him. He swallowed the pain. One request, it was precious. And Overhaul waited, expectant. The room fell silent. Izuku closed his eyes briefly. His mind raced. He could not waste this chance. He opened them and said, in a weak but firm voice, I will request it. Later. Overhaul stared, silence stretching long, then finally. Fine. He looked to Chronostasis, who approached, took Izuku's arm, and helped him down. Izuku tried to walk. He felt himself on the verge of collapse but steadied. Since arriving, he had refused any help, refused to rely on anyone. Being carried or treated delicately after all that had happened felt insulting. As long as he was conscious, he would return to his room on his own feet. Chronostasis lingered, observing. His gaze held no pity, only genuine surprise. As if, for the first time, he saw something inexplicable in this boy. Izuku took careful steps forward, resisting the pull of exhaustion. He breathed deeply, standing tall despite his pale face, his ghostly skin, and the dark shadows beneath his eyes. Yet he stood, waiting for whoever would escort him back. Chronostasis and Overhaul were still engrossed in research, so it would be another follower. Before he could see who approached, the door opened behind him, footsteps echoing. He turned, breath catching. The member who had left earlier bowed to Chronostasis and returned to his place after completing his task. But that wasn't what made his heart skip a beat. Chronostasis stood a little distance away, a silent statue, face unreadable, gaze cast downward. Izuku mirrored him. Then his eyes fell on something small. Bare feet. Ragged clothes. Tangled hair. She stood near Chronostasis, head bowed so low her white hair hid part of her face. She hugged herself tightly, trying to shrink, to disappear. Her knees were close together, shoulders trembling slightly. Her breaths were shallow, attempting to stifle sound. Her tiny toes pressed into the floor, ready to run but with nowhere to go. A child. Trembling. Afraid. Very small. Time stopped for Izuku. Blood froze in his veins. His face drained of color. Everything he had planned, everything organized, every mental construction since returning, turned to ashes. Overhaul didn't even notice his pause. He changed gloves, the sound of his movements mixing with the ringing in Izuku's ears. But Izuku saw nothing but her. Slowly, she lifted her head. She noticed a new face. And when her gaze met Izuku's, the air froze. In her eyes, fear, confusion, and a faint plea, asking for salvation. A question, almost silent in his heart, are you with me or against me? Something inside him shattered. Was I too late? Was I foolish? Did I fail by planning too much and acting too little? Put Eri on the bed, Overhaul said coldly. Chronostasis touched her shoulder. She flinched, glancing at him, then at Izuku, then back. A small, suppressed whimper escaped. And that was the moment Izuku's control shattered. No mind. No plan. No time. No logic. Only instinct. An old, violent, primal instinct. To protect Eri. Adrenaline surged. The experiment? The pain? The weakness? Forgotten. He ran. No one expected it. He shouldn't have moved with such speed, such intensity. He grabbed the nearest object. Chronostasis barely lifted his head before the tool's tray flew, its contents scattering across his face. Izuku snatched Eri to his chest. She was light, terrified. It's okay, it's okay. I'm here, he murmured, scanning for the exit. The door was closed, but he knew it would open if he approached. Entry required a card. Exit did not. He ran. The few steps. For a moment, his thoughts returned to him. He didn't think about what he had done wrong, how recklessly he had acted, how he had rushed in without any clear plan. He thought of only one word, and his mind chose to define him by it in that instant. A wall rose from the floor, a massive gray block erupting upward, blocking his path like a sudden arrow. He stopped, gasping. Overhaul stood there, one bare hand pressed to the ground. What a reckless act. No anger. No shock. Only disappointment. I thought you were more rational than this. Izuku. Izuku pushed Eri behind him, placing himself between her and them. He backed into the corner, dedicating every remaining atom of strength to her protection. When one follower stepped too close, Izuku used the wall to kick off, putting all his force into it, snapping the man's neck to the side and staggering him. His blows felt light compared to the Yakuza member, who caught Izuku's foot and hurled him to the ground. Chronostasis stepped toward Eri. A threatening sound tore from Izuku's chest. He did not surrender. His face remained fierce even after being thrown down. He lunged forward, grabbing a surgical knife from the floor and stabbing his attacker's leg. Skin split. Muscle convulsed. The man screamed. As a reaction to the pain, he kicked him. Izuku collapsed, the knife slipping from his fingers. A muffled cry escaped him. Then the blows came fast. Sharp, relentless. Ribs. Shoulder. Stomach. He tried to rise, fell. He tried to resist, crushed. Overhaul raised his hand. Stop. The follower retreated after bowing, despite his injury. Overhaul advanced alone. I truly don't understand, he said quietly, how you thought this would succeed. He moved closer. I thought you were smart. Was I wrong? He removed his remaining glove as he approached. Izuku couldn't move. Don't touch me, he screamed. A fight like this, Overhaul replied calmly, bending closer, is already hopeless. Izuku looked past him to the only person he wanted to protect. Eri crouched in the corner, hugging herself. Trembling. Her eyes were filled with fear, pain, and sorrow. sorrow for him. That hurt more than anything else. He smiled at her, a faint curve of his lips. The only thing he could still give her. Reassurance. An answer to the question in her eyes. I'm still here. His gaze flicked to the bandages on her arms. He remembered what her presence in this place meant. What awaited her. What he had failed to stop. With effort he lifted his head. Overhaul's hand touched him. Disassemble. Soundless. Colorless. It pierced the soul before the body. Overhaul had used his quirk before, likely assemble, targeting only part of him. This time, it was different. Pure torture, sweeping through him entirely. He screamed without realizing it was his own voice. Without knowing anything except the bloody explosion tearing through bone and flesh. Disassembled. Reassembled. Disassembled. Reassembled. And again. Until blackness swallowed everything. The last thought that crossed his mind was simple. I failed her. As he fell, all his plans fell with him. For the time traveler. The fighter. The one who thought he was ready. Defeat was as humiliating as ever. Perhaps more so. The screen flickers. A live icon appears in the corner, and the viewer count rapidly rises. 87, 45, 10. 800 viewers. The room is slightly dark, unusually silent. No makeup tools. No bright colors. No desk, the one the audience was accustomed to seeing behind the host. She sits silently in front of the phone, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes quietly watching the subscriber count grow, tension lacing her gaze. Comments begin to appear. Hi. We missed you. Creator, where have you been? Why no makeup today? What's going on? The young woman Haruka raises her hand and gives a small wave, her features clearly marked by exhaustion. Hello, everyone. Yes, it's been a while. A moment of silence follows. One of the comments asks where she disappeared to. She takes a deep breath, as if gathering the courage she has been holding back. This is the reason I started this broadcast. Actually, she hesitates. I was stalked. The flow of comments slows for a split second, then explodes. What? Are you okay? Oh my God. She lowers her head slightly before continuing. It was one evening after work. A follower of the channel recognized me, and then he followed me. I don't want to go into details, but... Her voice wavers. When I tried to get away, he grabbed me and dragged me toward an alleyway. It was terrifying. Her eyes shift nervously, but she forces herself to keep speaking. After what happened, I decided to quit streaming. This video, she exhales shakily, will be the last. A wave of protest floods the chat. Don't do it. We'll still be here to support you. Please don't disappear. But Haruka doesn't read them. Her eyes remain fixed on the phone's lens, though her gaze carries the weight of a painful memory. Then she speaks again, her voice quieter, almost fragile. I didn't open this stream to complain about what happened. Rather, she pauses. To offer thanks. She presses a button, and a video begins playing alongside the live stream. Thanks to someone who saved me. The footage starts. I thought he was a hero, but later I learned he was a vigilante. Some call him the sniper. The video shows a fight in a side street, a man blocking the attack of a known criminal, notorious for repeated assaults. The movements are fast, powerful, deliberate. In a brief, shaky shot, the vigilante appears. The image is blurry, but certain details are unmistakable. A black gas mask completely concealing his features. A simple black jacket, thin neon lines tracing the shoulders and chest. A low hood pulled over most of his head. A mismatched appearance, yet one clearly designed to instill fear in the hearts of criminals. The comments accelerate rapidly. Who is this? Oh, I know him. Why haven't we heard about him? That's the sniper. He appeared months ago. Haruka pauses the video. A small, genuine smile forms on her face. The law might consider him a criminal because he used his power, although I never saw what kind of quirk he uses. She swallows. But I know one thing. If he hadn't intervened that night, I don't know where I would be now. Maybe in therapy. Her voice trembles. Or maybe I would have lost my life. She blinks rapidly, breathing unevenly. More than a month has passed since his last appearance, and I'm still waiting for him to return. She lifts her head, her eyes glistening. A person with this much courage deserves to be called a hero. She leans closer to the camera. So, if you're seeing this, the sniper. Her lips curve into a trembling smile. Thank you. Her voice steadies, filled with determination. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for being there when no one else was. She looks straight into the lens. You are my hero. Slowly, the screen fades to black. The broadcast ends. Dobby sat in the corner of a small cafe, unremarkable except for the strong aroma of coffee and the winter light streaming through the glass. He wore a low black beanie that matched his dyed hair, not to completely hide his face, but to soften the intensity of passing gazes, an old habit he hadn't yet shaken off. He raised the cup to his lips. The coffee was hot. Really hot. He paused, staring at the dark liquid as if confirming the sensation. His tongue didn't burn. There was no numbness, just normal warmth, as if his body was still learning how to register it. He placed the cup back on the table and unlocked his phone, scrolling aimlessly, news, advertisements, random discussions. A shadow stopped in front of his table. Excuse me. He slowly lifted his eyes. A girl. She smiled hesitantly, clutching her phone with both hands, as if ready to retreat at any second. Can I have your number? He blinked. Your number, I mean, if this is annoying, it's fine, just... Didn't finish the sentence. She was waiting. Dobby stared at her for 2 full seconds. She didn't scream. She didn't step back. Her expression didn't change when she saw the dark lines that once burned but were now merely visible traces, or rather. His skin was clear now. No disfiguring scars. No burns. Since when do girls ask for my number? The words slipped out unintentionally, low and confused. She laughed softly. So, is that a yes? No. I don't give my number to strangers. He refused flatly, but she didn't seem to register the sharpness in his tone. Instead, she repeated her request, more insistently until, eventually, she left. Minutes later, the cafe was quieter. Left behind on the table, a half-empty coffee cup, a piece of paper with a phone number, and a strange, unsettling sense of anomaly. That was the first abnormal event. On the way home, people didn't nervously give him a wide berth. No one crossed the street to avoid him. A man passed by, his shoulder bumping into Dobby's. The man apologized casually and kept walking. Dobby stopped. He looked at his shoulder, then at the street, then continued on his way. 2 days later, he noticed a small advertisement taped to the window of a clothing store. Employee needed. He stood there for a full minute. Then he went inside. The store owner, a middle-aged man, looked at him with a completely normal gaze. No tense shoulders. No suspicious scanning. No hand hovering near a non-existent alarm. Do you have experience? The man asked. I can learn. Excellent. You start tomorrow. Dobby walked out feeling as though reality had shifted half a degree off its proper axis. In the days that followed, details accumulated. Customers, mostly girls, came in. Some bought things, others didn't, but many lingered longer than necessary. Curious glances. Shy admiration. Hushed whispers. He's mysterious. His voice is low. His eyes are attractive. No one said terrifying. No one said villainous. One evening in an alleyway, he sat on the curb, pulling out a cigarette he never lit. A skinny cat approached. Then another. They didn't run. They sniffed his hand. Then sat beside him. Dobby stared at them in silent disbelief. Even you? Even animals no longer fled from him. He lived in Compress's house. Or rather at Sushi Makabe's house. That was the name he learned after staying there for a while. A warm place. Slightly messy. Filled sometimes with laughter, other times with a comfortable silence. Atsushi seemed to live alone, though strangers occasionally came by to speak with him. Dobby never asked. He didn't care enough to. He was working. He came home tired. He slept deeply. Respectable life? But the body? The body wouldn't let him forget. It constantly reminded him that something fundamental had changed. The pain returned. Not searing pain. Not endless agony. Ordinary pain. The stupid kind. His body now registered pain signals again. After most of his body had burned, pain had faded into a dull memory, but now, stubbing his little toe against the table became one of the worst experiences of his life. And the cold. This month was particularly harsh. He was shivering. Truly shivering. He wrapped his coat tightly around himself, teeth chattering, his body fighting the cold instead of ignoring it. He waited impatiently to return to Atsushi's house. Had he stayed in his old, unheated room, he might have frozen for real. The irony was cruel. His body now suited his fire. He no longer burned himself when he used it excessively, but it no longer protected him from the cold. One night, he sat alone, staring at his hands. Healthy skin. Full sensation. Where are you, Deku? How did he succeed? How did he bring him back like this? A body that lives, not merely survives. He slowly clenched his fist. And what are you hiding, to give me all this? That was the only question he had no answer for. And the longer the silence stretched, the heavier it became. From the moment the public noticed that the vigilante who had become famous for his ability to save civilians in the streets of Mustafu had completely vanished, online platforms erupted. The reaction intensified, especially after the last stream of a famous makeup blogger, specializing in cosmetic products, turned out to include a clip in which the channel owner publicly thanked the vigilante for saving her. His last appearance had been weeks ago, during a mysterious incident whose details were never fully understood. Since then, no activity suggesting his presence had surfaced. Channels specializing in analysis began posting compilations of his recent activities, videos taken from afar, from bad angles, or with shaky cameras titled, "Where did the vigilante go? Is he okay?" The few clues we have. The disappearance of Mustafu's vigilante, a mystery worrying the community. Blurry images of the vigilante rescuing civilians, fighting criminals, or even escorting a group of drunks home flooded timelines and forums. Public account. It's very strange. We haven't seen any updates about the sniper. Has something bad happened to him? An account run by an amateur crime analyst replied. If we combine the timing with his sudden absence, there's a high probability he was targeted. Many gangs in that area wouldn't hesitate to kill someone who disrupts their operations. Hero enthusiast user. I can't believe no one is taking this seriously. Someone with this level of skill disappearing without a trace? That's alarming. The comments continued to pour in, speculation piling upon speculation. Compress was leaning against the couch in the middle of the living room, browsing his phone with one hand while sipping a can of soda with the other. The TV in front of him was tuned to a news channel, but none of the broadcasters dared to dedicate even a minute to discussing an aspiring vigilante over officially licensed heroes. Only the internet, it seemed, was boiling with questions and concern. Especially after the famous makeup blogger's final stream had casually mentioned the vigilante. Compress spoke without lifting his gaze. You're causing quite a stir these days. Dabi paused at the entrance, carrying 2 pizza boxes. For a brief moment, he thought the comment was directed at him. He stepped forward, set the boxes on the small table between the couch and the TV, and looked at Compress with faint surprise. I haven't caused any stir, he replied dryly. But Compress wasn't talking about him. The screen's flickering light illuminated his face, revealing something Dabi hadn't expected to see. A completely ordinary man behind the mask, returning from work, eating a simple dinner, watching the news, then leaving at night in strange clothes. Dabi had never asked, and Compress had never explained. It had simply become a routine, sharing meals, watching TV, sitting in silence. Neither of them ever mentioned Izuku, until Compress suddenly added, I'm talking about the short guy. Not you. Dabi frowned slightly. The short guy. Then it clicked. Izuku. For the first time, Compress had brought him up. A spark of hope ignited inside Dabi as he asked, what did he do? Did you meet him? Compress shook his head. No. That idiot is still missing. But he glanced at his phone. He suddenly has a large audience. Dabi was about to open one of the pizza boxes, but the words stopped him. He turned toward Compress, confusion evident on his face. An audience? He never seemed like someone interested in fame, or the internet, for that matter. He isn't, Compress replied simply. But he saved a famous influencer. She talked about him, and suddenly he became the topic of discussion. Not nationally, just in Mustafu. I doubt anyone outside the city really cares. Dabi fell silent, imagining Izuku thin, awkward, throwing himself into danger without hesitation. Of course. That makes sense. The boy had a hero complex you couldn't miss. But fame? He let out a quiet, almost fond chuckle. I can't imagine Izuku being famous. I guarantee he'd panic in front of any camera and forget everything he wanted to say. He smiled faintly and picked up a slice of pizza. Compress raised an eyebrow. Izuku. Dabi turned toward him, puzzled by the reaction. Yes. Izuku. The short guy. Though he's still basically a kid. But the confusion on Compress's face only deepened. He tapped on his phone for a moment, then turned the screen toward Dabi. Dabi looked. He read the headline. Mustafu's famous vigilante. Below it a blurry photo of a powerful kick connecting with a criminal's face. The gas mask. The black jacket. Something clenched painfully inside Dabi. Everything came crashing back at once. The warehouse. The vigilante standing alone before a group of Yakuza men. Overhaul. His reconstruction. And above all, the pain. The pain he hadn't felt in years. The pain that reminded him what it meant to be alive. Anger simmered beneath his skin as he asked, his voice sharp and restrained. Why are you showing me this? Compress frowned, more confused than irritated. Because that's the short guy I was talking about. Dabi froze. He stared at the screen. Then at Compress. Then back at the image. Finally, he spoke in a low voice thick with disbelief. Wait, you're joking. Right. Compress's expression didn't change. He wasn't joking. And the truth struck Dabi like a physical blow. The missing vigilante. The one the city was worried about. Was Izuku? Silence stretched between them for long seconds. Dabi kept staring at the screen, the blurry image of the vigilante frozen mid-movement while his thoughts collided violently inside his head. Then he lifted his eyes toward Compress. His voice was no longer steady. This is impossible, he said slowly. Izuku is just a boy who happened to meet you somehow. Astonishment passed between their faces, as if the entire room had frozen in place. Compress finally spoke, disbelief coloring his tone. Impossible? Are you telling me that the man who beats up criminals and dumps them in front of police stations is a kid? Dabi didn't answer immediately. He swallowed, then spoke with a heavy calm. Izuku isn't easy to recognize at first glance. Scrawny, quiet most of the time. His jaw tightened. But he's still too young to be a vigilante. That was when Compress exploded. Wait a second. His voice rose sharply, the loudest Dabi had ever heard it. Was I seriously hanging around with a kid who likes to sit on the edges of buildings? I thought he was just a short man hiding an ugly face behind a mask. Dabi shot him a cold look. He's not ugly, he said flatly. He's just shy. Compress slapped his palm against his forehead. Oh my God. Oh my God. He dragged his hand down his face. I was treating him like an adult, no worse. I thought he was some criminal who enjoyed isolation. He is not a criminal, Dabi said sharply, the words cutting through the air as if rejecting the idea itself. Compress exhaled deeply, then shifted his posture, finally sitting upright, serious for once. All right, let's assume this has gone far beyond coincidence. He gestured between them. Let's put everything on the table. What you know, and what I know. Dabi sat down across from him, as if silently agreeing to an unspoken pact. Compress began. That vigilante, he's the one who asked me to take you to a safe house. He said your previous location was no longer suitable, and that someone might be tracking you. He looked at Dabi carefully before continuing. He didn't tell me who you were. He didn't say your name. He paused. Seemed confident. Too confident. Something tightened painfully in Dabi's chest. Even while missing, Izuku had been watching over him. When Compress finished, Dabi spoke in turn. Izuku, he's also the one who told me someone would come to take me away. He took a slow breath. He didn't mention your name. Didn't explain anything. He just said, trust him. He'll take you somewhere better. The image of the warehouse flooded back into his mind. The vigilante standing tall. That calm, cold voice, nothing like a child's. The confidence. The way he moved. Could they really be the same person? Dabi's thoughts spiraled. Was Izuku protecting me? Did he move me here because he thought the Yakuza would follow? What did he get himself into? And why didn't he tell me anything? Suddenly, Dabi stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. I have to find him, he said urgently. Now. Compress reacted instantly. His hand clamped around Dabi's arm with a strength Dabi hadn't expected. Don't move a single step. Let go of me, Dabi said in a low voice, quiet, but dangerous. I won't, Compress replied firmly. If that vigilante really is him, he told me he'd be back after 2 months. Dabi froze. 2 months? Compress continued. There's a little less than 2 weeks left. That's all. He leaned closer, his usual playful tone gone, replaced by something serious. Convicted. Give him that time. Don't ruin whatever plan he has. If he's in danger, you rushing out now will only make things worse. Then, as if realizing the tension, Compress forced a small smile. And well, exam season has started in schools. Maybe the kid panicked and decided to focus on his future instead of playing vigilante. Dabi didn't respond. He sat back down slowly, as if gravity had finally reclaimed him. His emotions tangled into something he couldn't name. Anger, fear, guilt, longing. All of them churned violently inside his chest. After a long moment he finally spoke, his voice hoarse. Fine. 2 weeks only. He said nothing else. And he didn't need to.